I just wanted to smoke a cigarette in peace, but the monsters won't stop coming. Damn it. How did I end up in this world? The demon god was bored, so he decided to create a world called Helasion. His goal was nothing more than entertainment through battles, but honestly, I think he's disappointed. In the last 10 minutes, he watched me cry because I couldn't light my cigarette and almost got killed by an angry rabbit. Not even the other humans respect me. Here I'm treated like trash, but I know a way to become stronger. The secret lies in the monsters. I must eliminate as many as I can. I can trade eyes and teeth for points worth more than money. But what really interests me is the heart. Inside them there's a core that, when consumed, simply increases stats. Even though the taste is awful and the core is low class, tasting like burned tire dipped in cough syrup, my strength increases permanently. I'll grow stronger by devouring them. And then someday I'll take revenge on those bastards who threw me here. I'll take revenge on the demon god. My revenge will be terrible, but my gastritis will be worse. I have this knowledge because I was lucky enough to find a teacher. He has no arms, so I have to feed him, and even light his cigarette. I saved him some time ago in the forest, and now he teaches me everything he knows. I'm his portable cigarette lighter now. Today, when I went to sell the items, I saw the warrior Lee Seojun. He is a very powerful high ranker. He had some rare monsters and their hearts hanging like trophies. How I wished I could eat one of those cores. How many levels could I gain? How many points would a monster like that be worth? Would it also taste like burned tire? Currently, my cabin far from the city already cost me 8,000 points, so I have to go to the city to sell monster loot. More precisely, the central tower of Muddy Village. That's where the general administrator of this city is, the demon Krista. With a snap of his fingers, he activates the mark on the hearts of everyone living in Helasion. That's how points are recorded. And then quickly, everything I struggled to gather was sold. It was so little that the demon even laughed at me. But one day I'll kill him, even if it's from laughing too hard. So I need to return to the hunt. I won't get stronger just by hating them. I need to consume as much as I can. This core has a variable effect depending on the person. According to my master, the average is 0.6 experience gained per day for most people. Our protagonist gains 0.02 experience per goblin core. Currently, there are 4 initial attributes and everyone starts at level 7, which can go up to 1, the strongest. For our loser who doesn't belong to any clan, he needs to consume at least 50 goblins per day just to keep up with everyone else. So he returns to the hunt, farming many monsters every day. It's been 3 weeks since he started hunting like this. His sword was already at its limit. While thinking about buying another, something appeared behind his back. The monster struck quickly. "Was it you who massacred my people?" he asks. It was the first time the protagonist had seen a monster that could talk, and unfortunately, there was no mute button. "You've probably never seen a goblin like me," he said. This was the goblin's defender, the chief Karakra. Only then did the boy remember that his master had warned him about intelligent monsters, but hadn't mentioned that they were arrogant. The goblin wanted to kill him at any cost. Besides being fast, he was very strong. Karakra even mocked the boy for being weak. He had built expectations, since many of his comrades had died by his hands. But he could defeat this human using only his fists. Finding it strange, the boy says that he talks like a human for something that was made in this world. Curious, the goblin asks what he's talking about. The truth is that over the last 3 weeks, he hunted between 40 and 60 goblins every single day, totaling over 1,000. This forest is very small and there isn't even a single goblin house. So how can there be so many every day? Is Karakra shitting goblins or something? What the boy means is that they are just monsters that respawn infinitely. Suddenly, the goblin starts laughing uncontrollably. He laughs so loudly that the boy's ears start to hurt. The goblin says that he himself is not disposable like the others, but that he also doesn't want to talk about it. Then he tells the boy to shut up and says he will reward him if he manages to cause him any injury. In other words, he'll have to defeat him to learn anything. The boy charges forward with everything, using the dagger as if it were a long sword, trying to create an opening. But the monster was very smart. So the boy decides to change his attack, but the goblin defends it with ease, and even launches a counterattack. But at that moment, the boy says he should earn his reward. The goblin laughs and says this is finally getting fun. In a fraction of a second, he appears right in front of him. He was much faster now. Quickly, he reached the boy and struck him several times, throwing him away, making him crash into a tree, and the tree won the fight. Several ribs were broken. The monster was excited by the fight and was about to deliver the finishing blow. But the boy ran with all his strength. He needed to know about the demons. So once again, he returned to trading blows with the monster, forcing him to back away. The goblin was curious about how the boy was still moving despite having broken ribs and an injured left arm. Once again, he asked how the goblin had arrived in Helasion. Excited by the battle, the monster says he'll answer while they fight. The truth is that he wasn't dragged into this world, he came because he wanted to. He was hired by some demons, and in short, he's a mercenary, a freelance agent of evil. Hearing this, the boy starts begging him to explain how to leave this place. At that moment, the monster thought the boy had lowered his guard, but he was kicked hard in the stomach and also took several dagger strikes. The monster actually bled and tried to counterattack, but the boy was determined and drove his dagger straight into the center of the monster's chest. Everything was over. The goblin chief had truly lost, but he still wasn't dead and decided to tell everything. The truth is that he was deceived by the demons and became trapped there. Because of a fake contract made for him as a mercenary, he can't return to his home. Realizing he can no longer get any more information from the goblin, the boy says he's leaving. But the monster says he must receive his reward, and also says he will give him some tips. So the boy offers him a cigarette. And yes, the monster is actually smoking with the boy. The bastard spends the entire manhwa smoking, and now wants to get the monsters addicted too. Returning to the tower, the demon continues with the mockery. The hero asked to be treated. The demon accepted to do so in exchange for 10,000 points. And so he began the healing process, using a small spell on each wound in order to patch it up. The one with the black wings realized that the adventure must have gotten a lot of money, lack of usual complaint regarding the cost. Our hero then handed the demon a bag, wanting to know more about what could be done with what's inside it. The administrator knew very well that those weren't regular materials, yet upon seeing them was still left shocked, as those men that the young man had managed to slay were the powerful goblin chief. But the human didn't identify the demon's response, as he urged him to showcase his options. So, with a quick snap of the demon's finger, a window panel appeared before our hero. And so, as he was about to choose from between the many options, he began to recall his most recent encounter when the powerful warrior asked to be devoured by him while wondering if his killer, just like the rest of the goblins, knew about the secret method unlike him. Cha Muyuk affirmed that he did, but still had his doubts. The goblin chief immediately realized that the young man's hesitation was due to his unusual human characteristics, which wasn't a surprise coming from humanity's philosophy, and he asked him to pay it no mind, as it was an honor for one to become a part of his killer. The dying monster urged the protagonist to use his entire body, even as the young man still had his doubts, but the monster explained how his nails had great value, as they were recognized for their toughness among his family. With that being said, the human had no choice but to accept and express his gratitude towards the dying goblin. Karakra apologized for luring the protagonist into his weird fantasies one last time before passing away. Back to the present, as the young man gazed into the panel window that explained that the lens of the chief could enhance his vision, the hero realized once again how the goblin got what he wanted, and despite knowing that he was a monster, it was the only other to converse with him aside from the master. And as he began to think of how the chief goblin felt more like a friend, he asked the demon to transplant its eyes and teeth into him before asking if it was also possible with his nails. The demon confirmed that it was possible, and when asked if it could be tailored to the desired size, it affirmed that everything was possible with money. And with that being said, the young man felt thankful towards the goblin who became a part of him. Later that night, Cha Muyuk began to admire his Wolverine-like claws, making his master call him out for being a geek. And when asked if the claws were an odd transplant, the armless one affirmed that it wasn't, as they were perfect for sneak attacks. Cha Muyuk then regretted spending so many points on adding the remains of his friend to his own body. These ranked 7 weapons that would evolve with their owner are impossible to restore despite being known for their hardness and sharpness. The master asked students if Karakra had a core, which he confirms, and as he pointed out to his student, it must have given him great experience. He realized how far away his mind seemed. Realizing that something was on the mind of his student, the man decided to converse about it on a smoke break. The teacher explained how prideful chief goblins are and how it was his disciple's first time fighting a smart monster, before claiming that the young one would meet even more on his journey and could have truthful conversations with them, like the one he had with the goblin chief. And upon seeing how the young man was shocked to see him aware of his talk with the monster, the main thing that his expression gave away. He then advised the student to not hesitate when it comes to killing for progress, like the goblin chief must have advised him as well. The master explained that despite the bad feeling of killing a heartful creature, it had to be done in this continent, as trust and mercy could lead to disaster's defeat, before giving himself as an example. Yet as the young one grew concerned, the armist plan explained that he needs to be happy to have won and live to tell the tale, and that the claws within his hands were proof that he was a warrior. According to the master, his disciple had every right to be proud of himself. The flattered one expressed his gratitude towards his teacher for his warm words. When asked about his growth level, the young one affirmed that it exceeded all of his expectations. The next day, the claws were being put to the test. Out here, he charged right up ahead, before slashing a goblin with his new weapon, leaving it in great pain, before ultimately killing it. Korean Wolverine then shook the blood off his claws, making the blue splatter all over the ground. Upon absorbing the goblin chief, the HP and strength of the protagonist had been boosted by 10%. Later on the same hunting grounds, Cha Muyuk began to think of how he was slowly beginning to adapt himself to his new transplant, as these names were truly becoming his extensions. The young man was shocked to see that he didn't feel any pain upon using the claws, that he had total control over their lands. And just as he was thinking of how he wanted to gain power to live up to the master and goblin chief's expectations, and on the brink of a crucial decision, someone suddenly called him. The bully had returned, claiming that it was refreshing to meet him once again. When the hero asked him how he knew about his whereabouts, he claimed that he wasn't stalking him, just because he stopped to say hi, before claiming that the hero doesn't frequent many places and that he didn't find any monster to hunt, which is why he went for a walk and met him by surprise. This greatly angered the protagonist, that the body decided to address some more important matters. Upon hearing that there were rumors around about him having killed a powerful enemy, Cha Muyuk, that his secret weapon had been spotted, treated the bully as a stalker once again. But Bei Youngchul decided to cut straight to the chase, before revealing that it was the administrator who told him so, and that he was certain that the big catch didn't earn the young man much. The goblin slayer was left angry at Krusta. What relief that his Wolverine claws weren't spotted by the bully. The boy quickly grabbed the hero and asked for a share of his reward, giving him intrigue. Bei Youngchul then reminded him that less than a week was left, and that the way he treats the protagonist greatly depends on the way the protagonist treats him, which is why he claimed that they should stay as good friends. And after claiming that they should meet once again after picking their classes, the bully finally left, leaving our hero full of fury, to the point where he wanted to stab him in the back using his new claws. Even so, he quickly ditched the idea. With a young man who was amazed to have lost his temper as such, he reminded himself that it was impossible for him to kill the bully, who was also protected by a guild. Despite this place being like a game, one could still lose an arm or a leg, as the concept of HP was non-existent. And despite his ability to do surprise attacks, he needed to wait. In 6 days, the adventurers would have spent 5 months in the continent, and they will need to pick a class in order to become official residents. This will give the adventurers new stats, like magic power, as well as the ability to use skills. Yet these great abilities come with even greater drawbacks, as it meant that those of round 13 would become able to murder each other. Currently, these adventurers were unable to kill each other due to the well of the demons, yet killing and stealing will become crucial after 6 days. Those who had been in the content for the longest are usually the most out of danger, yet even they only had a year as the protection would eventually fade away. Our protagonist, clanless and guildless, decided to use his acquaintance with his master and the goblin chief in order to grow stronger for the sake of survival. And in order to gain power, the young man must first get accused of his valor and claws. Upon being spotted by the monster known as Patcherus, the young man began to think of how a giant frog-looking monster many users use its poisonous tongue for attacks and possess great speed and jumping abilities. This was rather challenging to kill and was also deprived of core, which the hunter had always avoided. Even so, he found himself in front of the giant tongue today, seeing how he aimed to use it as a training dummy for his new weapon. With that being said, the young man launched himself and avoided the venomous tongue by an inch. With that, he cracked his smile as his theory had been confirmed. The protagonist who slashed the venomous tongue now had the ability to predict the attack pattern. With that, Patcherus was left in great pain. If you add, the giant human decided to not let the giant frog fight back and end it in the next attack. Yes, as he was about to deliver the final blow, the giant frog jumped into the air, reaching high into the sky, before repositioning itself and falling headfirst to the ground, like a meteor descending from the heavens. The giant toad also opened its mouth in order to swallow him whole. The young man, who was surprised by the speed, realized that he needed to retreat. Yet he quickly dismissed this idea, having decided to place his faith in the gift of the goblin chief, and so he raised himself, before jumping into the air and charging at the incoming toad. Human and monster were now face to face, and with that being said, the final clash had occurred. With that, the toad was rendered motionless. Its corpse was lying down next to our hero. He was still amazed by the fact that he had achieved victory in a one-on-one fight. These claws had proven themselves to be more formidable than expected due to their power and precision. This made him admit once again the power of the goblin chief. The young man, who was certain to have no challenge with his new weapon and his future class, had a matter to attend to first. What had to be done was something crucial to his growth and required great focus for the sake of his teacher and fallen friend. 6 days had passed. Our hero presented himself in front of the selection tower in order to pick up his class. And despite this matter being simple, he couldn't help but feel anxious. Even so, he decided to step into the tower. By entering its giant gates, according to the rumor, the one that would give him his class wouldn't be the general administrator, despite the inside of this tower looking like his domain. But just then, the Wolverine realized something odd, as a mysterious dark gift box presented itself in front of him. Upon seeing it, the hero began to have doubts about whether he should or should not open it. But after thinking for a small while, he decided to give in to temptation. And just as he opened it, a strange form came out of the box, before a massive explosion. With that being said, our hero was now in front of a giant smiling entity. This type of demon was one of the most despised by the protagonist. A plant field asked the young one to come closer. The entity presented itself as Jack in the Box and welcomed the protagonist to something it called the consecration of the first blessing. Jack asked the young one about his opinion regarding his sudden appearance, but our weirded out Cha Muyuk asked the creature if all of its race began conversations as such. The buffoon explained that the humor which he excels at was crucial for all demons, and then burst out laughing upon hearing the hero claim that he didn't have time to fool around and wanted to cut straight to the chase. And so he decided to grant the young one his wish. The clown then presented the Goblin Slayer with many classes. Jack had picked up the classes that would interest our hero the most, where he should just stop twice on the panel of his choosing. The protagonist, annoyed by the library of the demon, had a hard time choosing what he wanted despite having already made his decision. Despite class not being the most crucial part, one still had to be wary when choosing it, as each class granted an advantage known as colonial privilege benefit proper to it, with murder being the most picked class. The reason behind this was the fact that it enhances strength, which is the most crucial stat in this continent, with most of the biggest names having chosen this class. Our hero knew that if he became a marauder like his teacher, he would be able to benefit from his experience. Even so, he decided to go for a different class, which was Hunter. Jack praised the young one for his choice, informing him that he would start the procedure right away. And with the spell being chanted, the young man has forever been changed. Cha Muyuk was left stunned, as he had become an official resident of the continent, with double the head and 3 skills proper to his new class, along with having acquired the stat magic power. The annoying creature then asked the protagonist if he was pleased with his choice, so he affirmed that he still had to test it. Our hero assumed that this double in half would allow him to double his growth rate for HP when consuming goblin cores before opting to look at the magic status, and upon seeing that it was nothing special, he assumed that he would need to consume many cores in order to enhance it. But while thinking of how this new stat would affect his skills, Jack affirmed that he still had to pick a unique skill. And as the demon explained how this was the biggest blessing for beginners and started to recite the many skills, our hero demanded camouflage of the jeweled lizard. This intrigued Jack, so our hero stated his choice once again. The demon tried to argue that there were many other options, but the young man still insisted on his choice. The amused clown decided to grant his wish, asking him to not cry about it later. And just like that, Cha Muyuk had acquired the skill he had demanded. Jack then asked the young man for the reason behind his choice, but upon seeing how he asked if he was forced to reply, the clown affirmed that he didn't, before suddenly changing forms. The entity seemed angry, as it popped up 3 additional eyes. Jack affirmed that his curiosity would be satisfied and that the young man was forced to answer truthfully. The imposing demon reminded the young man that he should always try to be respectful in front of their superior race. Yet the unfazed hero asked the entity if it was truly determined to hear his true answer. And so the giant demon reverted back to his original form, cracking back up his original smile and claiming that the young man should relax as he was just playing around. Cha Muyuk couldn't help but be left angry, With that being said, Jack praised the young man for staying alive for that long before explaining that the real hardships would start now. After that, he picked up his class and saw the demon bid his friend farewell, wishing him prosperity. That the young man finally exited the tower. After some time, he entered a small alley into a village. Our hero began to sweat bullets as he tried to catch his breath. The protagonist assumed that he was going to meet his demise as he had never been this overwhelmed. This made him wonder about the aura of the stronger demons, seeing how imposing the class selection one turned out to be. With that being said, the protagonist began to doubt his own abilities to face the demons and escape the hell they created. That same night, the master was intrigued by the unique skill picked up by his student, yet the young man firmly affirmed his choice. When asked if he was aware of the reason behind the importance of the first unique skill, the protagonist affirmed that he did. Aside from the one granted to the adventurer in class selection, only one true way can allow the adventurer to acquire a skill, which was discovering that one could either purchase or obtain from a fallen monster, with its value being proportional to its rarity. Yet seeing how high their price truly is compared to the usefulness, the best method is to acquire them while hunting. And seeing how weak monsters drop weak skills, one needed to hunt powerful monsters in order to acquire great skills. The reason behind the first unique skill being so crucial is the fact that it is the only one that could be acquired without any hardships. The young man had his doubts when giving the reason behind picking up this skill, but his teacher asked him to speak his mind at once. According to our hero, camouflage of the jeweled lizard allows the reorganization of the status exact numerical value for a short time period, meaning that it could be used in any situation. The master affirmed his speechless student that there were many others with better skills. Yet according to the young one, those better alternatives were either currently hard to learn or hard to obtain, and that he had a reason for his choice. As this was a unique skill that didn't rely on magic power, and seeing how unique skills could be refined, camouflage of the jeweled lizard that had a 0.5% growth rate would surely become a wild card in his arsenal. The young man affirmed once again that he had made the right choice as it was suitable for his low magic power. This earned him the teacher's praise for his mature philosophy. And so the armless one practiced a smile, determined to bring out the most of this skill's potential, before explaining that he had a monster in mind that would be much better than goblins. The next day, in another part of the woods, our hero had finally reached the location designated by his master, and just then, he saw it. The monster mentioned by his master. The creature in question also spotted the protagonist. Cha Muyuk knew that this monster lived alone in a giant territory, making him perfect for long hunts. First, using him for practice would allow him to take down others and gain points. With that being said, hunter and hunted were now face to face. The core consumer charged, thinking of how it possessed a marble. With that being said, he decided to resort to unique skill, in order to focus all of his stats into strength and agility, for the sake of slaying this new foe as quickly as possible. Cha Muyuk didn't pay his decrease of his endurance attention as he was certain of finishing the fight with a single strike. But just then, the young man was left alerted, as the monster readjusted itself, before delivering a powerful kick that countered his fierce claws. The monster with the broad head had overwhelmed the Korean Wolverine. Our hero, who had finally witnessed the fast jump attack of the creature, realized that it was his enhanced agility that allowed him to evade a deadly blow. The young man realized that the move of the creature took some time to reset, and that it would have eliminated him upon direct contact. The protagonist decided to finish it before the skill could be reset. Upon seeing how his attack didn't connect, he assumed that he wasn't fast enough. Only then did he realize that he was forced to parry an attack. And just like that, the hunter tanked the tail of the monster. That knocked him a few feet away. Yet this miscalculation allowed the young man to firmly grasp the power of the target's tail. This also made him realize that his unique skill was to defeat the pig-like kangaroo. With that being said, he dodged crushing death, only to find the monster right above him shortly after. The creature then let out a roar, before bracing itself and swinging its giant tail. Yet upon going for the strike, the protagonist was nowhere to be found. Only then did the young man appear right behind it. The mutant was left in a tough situation, trying to react. Yet the hunter knew very well that victory had already been achieved, as he slashed through the monster's chest using his claws, making it cough blood and scream. And as the young man firmly planted his extensions into the monster, its corpse was rendered lifeless. The hero tried to recatch his breath, now that the creature had fallen to the grasp of death. With that being said, our hero lay down on the ground and reached his claws to the sky, while thinking of how he managed to achieve victory with much more ease than predicted. Cha Muyuk found that the fight ended quickly, even for a monster with thin skin. The young man began to think of how the nails of his friend combined with his skills, as well as the stats he had accrued on for the monster, and the thing he aimed to acquire would give him even more power. Just like that, the fortunate hunter was now in possession of the monster's core. Upon consuming it, he found that it was more delectable than that of a goblin. The protagonist was then left amazed upon seeing how his strength had been enhanced by 0.16%. This left him overjoyed as his gains equaled the combined enhancement of 6 goblin cores. With the items now in hand, the general administrator pointed out how the number of tailbones, livers, and tendons from the koilo brought by our hero amounted to 1,190 points. This pleased the young man, as upon hunting the monster for almost a month, he had acquired 29,450 points in total. He kept on increasing his daily ratio of koilo kill count to 360 inches total. The effects of the cores also pleased him, as it was like none other. But as he began to think of how this creature who was more little than goblins, profitable course, and better point gain, he was interrupted by the demon, who urged him to go outside if he didn't have anything else to do in his shop, but the protagonist affirmed that he still had some business. The annoyed black-winged ones assumed that the young man was about to buy cigarettes. But upon hearing his desire to pay his rent up front, he called him out for this bad decision, as these were unpredictable times despite the young man having money. The demon then asked him if he needed anything else. so the young man revealed how he would be abstaining himself from the forced hunt. This revelation shocked the creature, who explained how he would have to pay a total of 10,000 points in order to evade the task. Seeing the hero insisting, he reminded him how fruitful the first forced hunt could be, and even then he remained firm in his decision. This lack of guts, despite having gained power, greatly entertained the demon, who granted the young man's wish, claiming that retreating could also be considered a plan. Just like that, rent and penalty had been paid at once. Cha Mu-hyuk knew very well that he could most likely get great gear by slaying weak monsters in the forced hunt, and even get skill rings if fortune smiled upon him, yet he needed to avoid it in order to ensure his survival. As in the first haunt, our hero would face all the contestants who were backed up by a group which could place his income and life in danger. The young man also planned to sneak into the hunting grounds of the clans and guilds in order to farm points while all would be distracted by the first hunt. Seeing how, despite the effectiveness of skill rings and gear points would always open more possibilities, the protagonist was certain that he made the right call as he returned home. Yet upon seeing what was inside, he was left horrified. As his master was lying on the ground, Cha Mu-yu quickly rushed to check on his master. The man explained how he had just been exposed to a few slaps. With that being said, the disciple rushed to install his master in a comfortable position before asking him about the culprits. The one who had beaten up the master turned out to be a man known as Park Hyun-soo, an acquaintance of the protagonist who he had met a week after arriving here. Park Hyun-soo, who tried to use the protagonist in order to earn himself some points, would surely not have approached the master if he was in his peak condition. When asked for a reason behind that violence, the teacher explained how some guilds forming an expedition squad needed some intel from him. Since many areas in this continent were undiscovered, unveiling them would bring great fortune, which is why he got beaten up, as he had info on an unknown area. This confused the young man, seeing how the thug could have easily and formally asked him. Yet the master affirmed that they didn't need to do so, seeing how he was a weak source of intel with a known location, before pointing out the kind nature of his student. This greatly angered Cha Mu-hyuk. The master then asked the student to avoid any direct combat with the man who might come for him, seeing how he didn't get any intel the first time. But the angered one explained that as a newbie he was unkillable by the older residents, meaning that he had no reason to fear. Yet upon hearing the teacher who endured the beating due to his stats explain that the bully was still too strong for him, he claimed that he wouldn't seek combat but be prepared for it. Later on, while walking in the woods, our protagonist realized that the skills he kept on spamming had been strengthened a little. He also knew very well that he had to enhance his health and stamina, as this Hun T would be a long one, which is why he tried to balance his stats. But just then, something caught his attention. The protagonist was now face to face with a rainbow snake, a brilliant forest monster whose eyes, venom, and skin could be sold for an extremely high price. Our hero could even use its meat as food for himself or a way to lure other monsters. He was particularly startled to have met this monster at the start of his journey. With that being said, the creature was left alerted. The scared reptile charged at the Korean Wolverine, only for our hero to go for a thrust that struck the monster's upper jaw. And just like that, the rainbow snake had been slain. Cha Mu-hyuk speculated to earn more points than he had predicted if he stumbled upon more expensive monsters who were easy to kill, and so he was determined to clear this area of monsters before the first hunt could reach its end. Shortly after, the young man took his fighting stance once again, as he was now face to face with a golem. Silence reigned supreme as monster and human were face to face. The golem was the first to attack, delivering a punch so powerful that it could crush the ground, but the quick hero managed to sneak himself behind it before resorting to his powerful goblin nails and decapitating the giant of stone. Just like that, the Korean Wolverine had achieved yet another victory. Seeing how this item that he had gotten from this monster could be sold for 3,000 points, our protagonist realized that this place was truly a golden goose for newbies. Our protagonist was also pleased with his choice and unique skill, as its effectiveness allowed him to earn more than 12,000 points. Our hero happily recalled the baffled reaction of the general administrator, wishing that he could have captured this moment forever. Yet, while thinking of how this forest was the property of a major clan, and how ivory was useless, as all were facing the same problem, he suddenly heard something. The start of the protagonist quickly pulled out his claws, still baffled by the fact that someone approached him without him noticing. With his claws out, the mysterious one hiding was left intrigued. Cha Mu-hyuk, who was too distracted by his earnings, realized that another contestant in 13 rounds must have skipped the first hunt, meaning that it was certainly a first year. Seeing how only newbies were attracted to this forest, the young man speculated that he should rearrange his stats for the fight. But just as the young man raised his voice while speaking to the intruder and urging him to come out, a redhead suddenly appeared from the bush. Upon seeing the lady carrying a dagger, the hero recalled her well, as during his first 7 days on the continent, as he was trying to run for his life, a wild dog-like monster appeared. He and the other newbies tried to make a run for it. The protagonist was particularly terrified. But just then, he noticed something intriguing. As the lady, he didn't have the opportunity to know her name, yet he called her very well. In the state of panic, was the only one to face the monsters. While others were too scared to fight, she stood on the front lines alone. The ashamed protagonist was once among those who ran away. Upon hitting the girl, he asked him if they were both first years. He realized that she didn't remember him, just as expected. The hero even gave a shady answer when asked if he was alone, as her reaction was unpredictable. The lady wanted to know how long he had been in these hunting grounds, but the hero refused to answer once again before pointing out that they were here to accomplish the same goal, which is why they should cut to the chase. And with that being said, the lady stated that she would hunt in the east while he takes care of the west, before warning him of entering her territory. Cha Mu-hyuk, the girl who turned out to be a fan of X-Men, asked the protagonist if he was inspired by the franchise while picking his weapon. The fake Wolverine affirmed that he only chose it for its efficiency, making the girl chuckle as she didn't want to admit the truth. This reaction made the young man blush a little. With that being said, she wished him luck. before going on her way and leaving him irritated. Cha Moo-hyuk was annoyed by the fact that a girl mocked him after spawning out of a bush, and while complaining about her attitude, he began to think of how relieving it was to see that their interaction ended in peace. Our hero also decided to keep an eye open, seeing how a potential betrayal was still in question. But upon recalling her angelic laughter, the young man began to blush once again. Even so, he decided to pull himself together and hunt before any other interruption occurred. Hunting would be the best way for him to keep his mind in the game and finish his task quickly before returning home. Shortly after, the protagonist began to think of how his constant weariness was doubling the efforts on him while exiting the forest after a successful day. This made him realize how convenient allies could be before thinking of how the girl seemed to also be on her own, which left him intrigued, seeing how she should have entered a good guild with her set of skills. But as he began to wonder about the reason behind her solitude, he quickly shook off the idea, claiming that he would head back immediately in order to have a meal and get some rest. But just then, the core consumer noticed his first goblin. Thus, the hero decided to do his thing before going home. The creature was left confused, and before it could even react, the predator had already grabbed it, before making its broad spill everywhere. Cha Moo-hyuk located what he sought from the goblin, who became too much of an easy prey. With that being said, he consumed the green marble, and while he was preoccupied with being disgusted by the taste, he was suddenly spotted. This left him startled, as it was none other than the girl from before. The disgusted lady thought of the protagonist as a madman, while he was left horrified, seeing how his secret had been unveiled. The protagonist was irritated by this sudden meeting, annoyed by the fact that the lady ended her hunt at that crucial moment. Even so, the lady that was calling him a madman shouldn't have spotted the marble, judging by her disgusted reaction. The baffled redhead assumed that our hero had consumed the heart of the monster. He tried to argue that he was poor, yet she affirmed that this doesn't make him less of a madman. Yet, as the young one tried to explain himself, the lady claimed that she didn't expect to have haunted next to a mad psychopath. Seeing this hostility, our hero affirmed that he could explain himself, yet the lady didn't want to hear any of it, considering him a madman. Just that she was determined to kill. Cha Moo-hyuk pointed out how odd it is for her to try and eliminate him without giving him a chance to explain his actions. The girl stopped for a second. Our protagonist explained that she would receive the fight if she sought it, yet it would be better to resolve it in peace. With that being said, he let out his claws in order to brace himself, before asking the lady what option she chose. According to the redhead, someone as crazy as him was too unpredictable to be left alive, but she accepted to talk it out, claiming to be a pacifist. First, our hero had 5 minutes to justify his actions. The Goblin Slayer claimed to have truly eaten the monster's heart, and it wasn't out of madness. The intrigue began to mock him for considering the heart a delicacy upon hearing this. Cha Moo-hyuk explained how he was living with his teacher and savior, who was rendered handicapped, and that his skills weren't enough for the both of them to survive, which is why he decided to apply the teachings of the man and consume monsters in order to save some money. Yes, the lady had her doubts, seeing how similar goblins were to humans while other animalistic monsters existed, so he explained how he was forced to consume goblins to survive. Living here was somewhat disgusting, upon claiming that the taste would be more pleasant after getting used to it, before offering her some, which she immediately declined. And when asked when he went for the heart, especially, the young man explained how he used it to replace vegetables. The redhead creeped out. Our hero then explained that despite being disgusted at first, he had no choice but to endure it, and he and the lady had similar stories, only different means to ends. This left her on his words. With that, the Wolverine affirmed that he wasn't a cannibal and affirmed that if she didn't believe him, as he pulled out his claws, that she was free to go for the other option, and that he would do his best to achieve victory, seeing how he owed something to someone. The redhead decided to not bite into the story but decided to let it go, as she was exhausted from the hunting and didn't have enough proof of his insanity. Even so, she affirmed to him that at the slightest sign of madness, she would surely charge at him. She also explained that he was free to hunt here once again but to stay out of her territory, seeing how he wasn't worthy of her trust. And with that, the lady bid our hero farewell while insulting him in a low tone that he managed to hear. The relieved Cha Moo-hyuk decided to be more aware when consuming corpses, seeing how he had almost been uncovered if it wasn't for his made-up lie. He then began to reflect on the tiring personality of the lady that would surely pose a problem the next day. The next sun finally died on the continent. The young man arrived at this scene, rather happy with his new equipment. The protagonist had bought a piece of buffalo leather armor, which was a rank 7 low durability light item that cost 45,000 points. Our hero began to think of how convenient armor is, seeing how it could be paired with something else. The young man also wanted to earn 50,000 more points in order to purchase a skill ring that he desired, which would have been possible in 4 days, if it wasn't for the other adventurer, who gave him intriguing gazes. The protagonist assumed that she was awaiting his arrival, and so when he confronted her about it, she denied the whole thing and claimed that they should set their territories for the day. With that being done quickly, the lady warned him once again to not enter her grounds, yet he couldn't care less. But as she began to walk away, while mumbling to herself, she was called by the protagonist, leaving her even more irritated. Cha Moo-hyuk claimed that they should introduce themselves to each other, seeing how they were forced to converse, only for his idea to be quickly rejected. This left the young man rather angered by the short temper of the lady, who even refused to state her name as she didn't have faith in him, despite his good behavior. He then began to recall how his teacher once trusted his opponent, which led him to lose 3 lamps. And with that being said, decided to take his misfortune as an example, thinking of how the lady would have been friendlier outside the continent. The annoyed hero then decided to take a small smoke break only to hear an unexpected voice. That left him alarmed as more people appeared in the forest. He quickly hid behind the city, thinking of how the intruders must have also skipped the hunt. And with the 2 new faces in the brilliant forest, the smoker was left on his guard. having recognized both of them as from the same round as him. Even so, he could only remember them by the fact that they were non-Koreans. The two men discussing how they should have enough points and gear for them to pillage. And as they continued their conversation deprived of honor, they discussed, this protagonist realized that they planned on ambushing the lady. After thinking for some time, he thought it would be wise to dispose of them for his own sake, as they were planning on ambushing the girl and roaming in the forest until the end of the hunt. Yet despite not knowing how powerful these two were, he assumed that since he and the lady matched them in number, fighting them was worth a try. Yet, as he began to plan on killing the first by surprise and slaying the second on his own, he realized what he just thought, as he had easily planned on taking his first life without giving it a second thought, making him assume that he was changed by the goblin hunting. This also made him recall his victory over the goblin chief, but just then he was about to back out of it as the ambushers were about to disappear. So he decided to push this matter aside and concentrate on them. The fat one asked his friend to conceal himself while he searched for their target, and after a short while, she was finally spotted. The lady with a dagger was fighting a giant insect that was giving her a hard time. The fat one instructed the other to hide in the bushes. Out here, who assumed that they were waiting for the right opportunity but couldn't hear them, assumed that the lady should easily take care of the both of them. But just then he noticed that one of the ambushers wasn't holding a weapon, and that the other was about to unleash a sneak attack that he must interrupt at all costs. First, he decided to track the blonde one. As the lady's fight with the ant was about to come to an end, the thug realized that it was almost time for the ambush. In the end, the girl decapitated the giant bug, rendering her the winner of the fight. Seeing this made the young man realize that the ambushers were about to act, so he decided to resort to his unique skill, in order to enhance his stamina and agility and take them down in a short time while deciding to rely on stealth in case of emergencies. At the same time, the redhead began to think of how her prey was tougher than expected. She was about to check her prize. Shurikens had been pulled out. Our hero was left annoyed as he should have predicted that they were going to use long-range attacks. With that, the thug prepared to launch his projectiles, so the young man rushed to stop him. Yet it was too late. As the shurikens had already been thrown, Cha Mu-yuk instantly warned the girl to duck. This made her turn around startled. Seeing this, the fat one came out of his hiding spot, annoyed by the fact that the girl wasn't alone. Just then, she had been hit in the shoulder and the thigh. The criminal demanded to know who the party pooper was. With that being said, began the clash between the hunters of round 13, with the fat one charging at the lady, who clashed with her dagger using his bare hand. And while she was annoyed that he was using a skill, he urged his partner to finish his opponent at once, a task that's the image it went to execute. The young man realized that the old one was about to use a body kick, so he planned on parrying and taking a few steps back. But when the kick was executed, he was left startled, having realized that his opponent knew martial arts. Just like that, the young man had been kicked in the face, and with that being done, the thug began to laugh proudly, claiming that he was stronger than the others from round 13. Yet at that moment, Wolverine was more preoccupied by the fact that the kick tickled, leaving the kicker intrigued. With that, our hero casually punched him in the face, knocking him down while still being confused about how the damage of the kick was rather weak. Meanwhile, back at the other fight, the lady, who realized she was facing a kickboxer, was surprised by her opponent's speed. Just then, he charged at her, resorting to his skill once again. The guy realized that she couldn't await the incoming blow, so she had no choice but to block it. Even so, she was knocked into the air, before falling back on her back. The criminal praised her for showcasing such skills despite being injured as he decided to finish her off. But just then, he was left alarmed, upon realizing that the young man was about to punch him, but the fat one quickly blocked the incoming blow. He then proceeded to call our hero a rat for following them before asking what happened to his ally. Being treated as a pest was found ironic by our hero, seeing how they were the true ambushers. With that being said, Cha Mu-yuk proposed to puncture his opponent's face. Yet upon being bombarded with a barrage of punches, our hero realized that this man who knows martial arts was a marauder. The endurance of the protagonist began to annoy the thug, who claimed that if it weren't for those irritating game-like perks, he would have already won the fight as well as his friend who just died. But the hero affirmed that he was alive. Just then, the fat one got through the defense of the protagonist, asking him if he was expecting praise for his mercy. And with that being said, he delivered a powerful punch to the gut. The smoker was amazed to see that despite his protections, he was still feeling pain. Even so, he was determined to achieve victory. This attitude made the criminal recognize tenacity. The man then grabbed him by the hair, pointing out his martial arts skills that were inferior to his. Our hero was filled with frustration when he asked the man if he planned on eliminating him and the lady, and after pausing for a small second, he burst out in laughter, affirming that this was the purpose of a surprise attack, thinking that the young one was back to beg for his life. The criminal then affirmed that begging would be useless, seeing how the fight had already been engaged, so the young man affirmed that this wasn't the case, as he placed his fist on the man's heart, who mocked him, thinking that this was a weak punch as our protagonist asked him once again if he truly wanted to take their lives. And as the man confirmed once again, the protagonist found his expression filled with sadness. As he executed the man, blood began to come out of the mouth of the criminal who just realized that he had been taken out by a secret weapon. Before falling dead on the ground, Cha Mu-yuk was surprised to see that the same voice he feels when eliminating goblins manifested itself upon killing this man. He could only feel the satisfaction of victory and the damage of the battle. This made him assume that hunting had truly changed him. Just then, our hero was approached by the lady, who, despite being confused, recognized that the young man had saved her life. As the protagonist explained how he had spotted them by coincidence, she had shown them mercy in the past, which they didn't appreciate. When asked why she was helped out, the hero explained that it was only rational, seeing how he would have become their next target. With that being said, the blushing redhead finally expressed her gratitude towards her savior. This left him stunned, to a point where his silence confused the girl. and so he claimed that he wanted to hear her words again as the shock of the fight rendered him deaf, leaving her annoyed. But he affirmed that it was the least he expected, seeing how he got hurt protecting her. As the embarrassed redhead thanked him once again, claiming that she would repay the favor, our amazed young man claimed that he wanted to hear it one more time, leading to him being grabbed by the collar. But just then, they heard grunting by the tall one, who was still amazed by the fact that his ally, who should be the most powerful of the Ru, had fallen. Seeing how the old man, who had faith in his companion, approached them so casually made the protagonist realize that he wasn't very smart. Just then he realized that the lady was angry beyond reason. Her rage terrified the criminal, who decided to make a run for it. With that, the girl tried to attack him with the same shuriken he used on her as the protagonist tried to stop her. Yet once again, it was too late. And just like that, the projectile hit the man in the skull, making him fall dead on the ground. The frustrated hunter asked the lady for the reason behind her action, to which she responded by stating that it was only natural seeing how they tried to kill them first. The protagonist tried to argue that there was no need to attack someone fleeing away, which left him intrigued as he himself could understand the reason behind her anger. But just then the lady pointed out that something wasn't right, before calling the protagonist for not doing much in order to prevent the murder. This left him baffled, as silence reigned once again in the forest. The young one asked her if there was really no problem, which she confirmed with an annoyed expression. The mark harvest allows one to take the points of someone with no beating heart for a short period of time that could be eternal if placed in the tower. Our hero claims that he would consider both marks mark harvest as a token of her gratefulness, but the lady affirmed that it wasn't the case, as warning her about an incoming attack and helping her bat it were two different things in her book, leading the protagonist to be amazed by how difficult she is as she screamed at him to help her walk. The young man accepted to offer help, claiming that he was also injured, making the girl point out how he was less wounded than her. He explained how the thieves wasted their farming time, which made the lady assume that he wanted to make her feel guilt, yet he denied, stating that they must have a good loot, which the lady agreed with, seeing how powerful the thieves were. But as she began to complain about how she could have taken them on if it wasn't for the surprise attack, the hero realized that she wasn't so cold after getting to know her. This made him recall the words of the lady, which made him reflect, and when he was asked what was on his mind, he claimed to have forgotten what he wanted to ask her, but the girl used it as an opportunity to mock him for being a victim of Alzheimer's. This irritated the hero, who just recalled his question regarding the reason behind her not being in a guild. The girl was left intrigued by this question, so the protagonist explained how odd it was seeing how powerful she is. With that, she stopped for a second, before explaining how she was once a part of Six Pole. This left the protagonist amazed, as this was a family made by 6 strangers who were all Koreans, and when he asked about the reason behind her leaving them, her expression darkened, as she refused to answer the question. Our hero was left baffled, as this was his initial question. Seeing how there was room for conversing with the lady, he decided to go hit himself while she complained about her broken leg. After a short while, they finally made it to the tower, and as the young man began to complain about how hard it was for him to carry her here, the angered girl affirmed once again that she was injured. With that being said, she pushed him aside, claiming that she could go on her own from now on, which she found pretty hurtful seeing how much he had helped her. But the girl affirmed that their helping was mutual. Yet just as he was about to leave, regretting not ignoring her from the start, she uttered the word "So Young." The lady, who recalled how the young man wanted to exchange names, Charlie presented herself as An So Young to the protagonist, who introduced himself as well. With that being said, An So Young cracked an angelic smile as she bid him farewell, leaving him smitten. Only then was he approached by the entity with the black wings. That startled him and snapped him back to reality. The administrator, who realized that the young man had turned early due to his injuries, charged him 10,000 points once again for healing services. After the healing, when asked if he needed any other services, he claimed to have 2 marks. This pleased the blonde entity, who claimed that the young one finally realized that the best way to obtain points was to kill other contestants, explained how slaying monsters is good but one needed to kill other players in order to survive. This made him remember the murder of the goons, as well as the dark gaze of the lady, who pointed out how he didn't try to prevent the murders. The frustrated young man then pushed the demon away, and her name that he stumbled upon 2 contestants who had murdered each other, yet the demon didn't believe him one bit. With that being said, the administrator decided to check what he had looted. After finishing his business inside the tower, the young man began to complain about the demon trying to get on his nerves despite his already bad mood. He then began to wonder if his new partner had already returned to the forest. Before opening his panel window, and thinking of how the marks of the thugs contained 80,000 points which could allow him to get a decent skill, Cha Moo-hyuk knew very well that his heart was full and tortured by desires, yet he decided to gaze upon tomorrow. The protagonist decided to keep his quick growth going, before looking at the tower, and thinking of how he would one day make the demons reveal everything to him. As the next day dawned, a giant frog that was in the forest suddenly felt alerted, so it unleashed its powerful tongue in order to attack, only for the attacker to jump at her from behind, and stab the toad in this call using his powerful claws. Just like that, another monster had been slain. The protagonist cracked up a smile, seeing how pleasing the results were, as they were incredible and worth the loss of blood that he suffered. Rush of the Fearful Baroque was a unique skill that multiplies all stats except magic by 2 that our hero used to make the monsters in the brilliant forest as easy to hunt as goblins. Out here, he then snuck up behind a giant golem and charged at him from behind. Only then did he feel a sudden change, as the good thing came to an end. And while evading the incoming hit, he began to think of how this skill had a small duration that makes one feel heavy upon ending, which was something he needed to adapt to. Cha Moo-hyuk then climbed up the arm, thinking about how the other con was the long grace at a time caused by his lack of magic power. Magic and magic power were two different things, as the second has a reset time and doesn't require MP, which reduces the cooldown and increases efficiency once upgraded. Magic power was the only stat that couldn't be affected by his new unique skill, and the start of its long cooldown that needed to be shortened had many signs, with the first being a pain in the head, as the skill could be used once again once the agony is gone. As the protagonist picked up the core, he began to think of how the 20-minute cooldown would double if the new unique skill is paired up with his first one, which didn't seem unfair. The young man also realized that this skill could become his wild card once he got stronger, to the point where it could greatly help him in the upcoming trials. Shortly after, near the tower, the young man turned to the village, and was left shocked upon seeing many hunters exit the gate, which meant that the forced hunt came to an end. This greatly annoyed him as it meant that he needed to abandon the fancy hunting grounds that gave him great profits and go to his original spots. But just as the protagonist was about to set some items and go supper at home, he was suddenly approached by someone, when that turned out to be the bully who always seemed to locate him. As Cha Mu-yu pointed out how the hunt must have gone smoothly, the bully took it as some kind of insult, before claiming that he was only saying this to the protagonist, who tried to explain himself. Bae-yu-chul surprised the hero by suddenly showcasing his anger while he asked for the reason behind his absence, making the hero ask if this was truly a big deal. But the bully affirmed that it was, as he explained once again that the treatment he shows the protagonist is relative to the one he shows him. Bae-yu-chul then explained that his lackey could have at least shown up, leaving him rather disappointed. The bully then affirmed that teaming up with the young man was the only way to survive this continent, which is why this would be his last mercy. With that, he pushed the hero away before demanding him to show up to the next forced hunt. And as the harasser claimed that the young man could either be his lucky charm or his kill, Cha Mu-hyuk realized that something was weird. Just as the bully was about to hit the young man for his dark gazes, he was suddenly called by someone, who urged him to finish off their urgent business, making him rush to do it. With that being said, he left while warning the protagonist of the next hunt. The hero was intrigued by this change of personality and his desire to force their team up, only to realize that the reason wasn't so obscure, as he had gone through it too, the event of taking a life. A month after this incident, the protagonist suggested digging in to his master, who was intrigued by the fact that he had spent quite some money in order to make the meal. The protagonist explained that since his earnings had increased and that he needed new gear, he would also buy fancy food, earning him the scold of his master, who realized the way his students lived on Earth and that he was longing for fat food, and so the teacher who couldn't eat at all proposed a cigarette before the meal. The man then pointed out to a student how the forced event was less than 72 hours away. With that being said, the master firmly advised his young student to go all out in the upcoming hunt, which he accepted to do. He then pointed out how the bully was dragging his disciple into the event, who he claimed to be even faster than this continent. Bae-yu-chul must have realized that the fruitful hunt is extremely violent after taking a life. The master then explained how one must have a lot of wild cards and how the protagonist should ignore his kind nature there, and that he was already prepared to do it. This left the young man shocked, as he called the first person he killed, claiming that he would remember the advice of his master. With that being said, the one with no arms was left reassured. Before apologizing for bringing up such a sensitive matter and proposing to dig in, starting with the chicken, the protagonist expected his master to be aware of his first kill despite not having told him, and so he was determined to do his very best to survive, in order to escape the continent along with his teacher. 3 days later, so the portal was finally opened. All contestants were bracing themselves, as the forced hunt was about to begin. With that being said, ready for the upcoming brutal event, the protagonist tried to calm himself down by remembering his growth. With that, he was finally ready to enter, and so he walked into the portal. After a blinding light, he found himself in a dark place with a purple moon along with the others. And just as he began to wonder about their next action, an entity suddenly popped up, casually greeting the contestants. The demon, who noticed that they were newcomers, presented himself as Kero, the hunting enforcer. As the body asked him to cut straight to the chase with an angry tone, the entity pointed out how he was as enthusiastic as ever. The protagonist was left intrigued by the demon, who took this insult as a joke. With that being said, it presented the map of the hunt, as the place pointed to. Just like that, all were left amazed, as the enforcer presented the map as the Tower of Time. Cha Mu-hyuk and An So-young were amazed by how such a structure suddenly appeared. The demon explained that the name of the map was nothing, and that they needed to ascend to level 5 inches order to complete the hunt, and that the final floor only opens every 10 days and would be sealed until then. The entity then cheerfully explained that those who ill to enter the level would fade away with the map, which would be the best option for the weaklings. And as the protagonist realized why this creature was despised by everyone, it procured watches in order to watch the time. The second rule claimed that no one could get piggybacked, as one needed 100 kills to enter the final level. Rule number 3 is that the monster processes black coins called tower tokens that cost 1,000 points each, as well as skill rings. The entity then playfully informed the contestants that they were free to take the watches from the others in order to add their KDA to their own, leaving the contestants in chambers. Out here, he realized that it insinuated that one could kill powerful contestants in order to save his energy. Rule number 4 is that all living beings would discover the location of anyone who spends more than a day inside the same floor, leaving the bully particularly shocked. His teammate pointed out how it was a hustle for their big group. Well, he claimed that this was no surprise coming from the demon. Bae-yu-chul reassured his teammate that their powerful group had nothing to fear. Even so, he knew very well that he was the powerful one, and that his teammates were just pawns to manipulate and dismiss. The lady realized that the final rule would increase the number of fights occurring on the map, while the protagonist realized that he was in a tough spot, as due to his absence on the first hunt, no one was likely to take him on their team, with the exception being the bully, who would surely betray him. meaning that his only option was the redhead. And so, after gathering the necessary courage to approach her, he was shocked to see her taking the first step instead. With that being said, they were now face to face. The young man was surprised to see that she was the one to propose the team-up. An So-young explained that the only option for a loner like him would be to work with her as she urged him to choose. This made our hero crack a smile before accepting the team-up, when suddenly he was grabbed and dragged by the lady who urged him to hurry up. An So-young claimed that they should run as fast as possible, seeing how it had already started. The protagonist recognized once again how amazing this girl was. Seeing this left the bully in rage, as he urged his teammates to rush in as well. Bae-yu-chul was angered by the fact that he was turned down but consoled himself by thinking of how he was going to dispose of the one he decided to kill. The enforcer was left annoyed, seeing how the rushing humans skipped what he still had to say, and so he decided to explain the rest at the entrance before admiring their passion. Meanwhile, the hero who claimed that speed was great explained that they should plan together before doing something like that, but his partner affirmed that they had no time as talking was wasting their precious and crucial time. The young man assumed that he might have made the wrong choice, seeing how his partner charged in without thinking about potential traps. An So-young decided to talk about just like our hero wanted, as she asked him about the staircase he desired to take. After thinking for a small time, our hero declared that it didn't matter, seeing how they didn't know what lay ahead, which his partner agreed with, as well as the enforcer, who suddenly popped up behind them, moving them horrified as he explained how despite everyone being different, they had the same difficulty, meaning that their choice didn't matter. The angry lady called out the enforcer for his race always carrying the humans, so he explained how it was his way to help them relax. While our hero, who realized that this one was just as annoying as the clown demon, asked him if this star war was similar to the one in the village. And when asked to elaborate, the protagonist asked him if there was going to be a separate dimension for every team. Cha Moo-hyuk explained how the administrator appeared to each contestant at the same time. Game. It was the explanation he didn't understand. The enforcer had a hard time following, so the young man clarified by pointing out how they didn't need to worry about other teams, seeing how the demon wanted to keep their floor a secret. Upon hearing this, the entity took a liking to the clever one, before giving him and his teammate a watch, and asking for this watch to be treasured as it would help them keep track of the days, as well as pressing it once to see their KDA and twice in order to know about their whereabouts, meaning that it would give them their exact location after entering a new level, while pressing it 3 times, would allow them to see the ranking. And with that, the demon also mentioned how they could be rewarded for their efforts and that anything that isn't picked up will be reset. The lady realized that it meant that they would fade away and that if a fight occurs at reset time, it will not be cancelled and the remains would not disappear. And as the protagonist realized that it would be challenging to find somewhere to hide with their items, the explanation came to an end. An So-young asked him if he didn't leave any detail behind, making the enforcer affirm that they wouldn't find happiness if they can't have faith in others, what she found ironic as it was coming from a demon, as her partner explained how he goes for the third option on QMC. The girl agreed to let him choose, seeing how she doesn't resolve to this method, claiming to be a brilliant student. The enforcer realized that the entertaining protagonist was the one Jack told him about. Suddenly, he realized that he had forgotten a detail, before quickly remembering it, regarding the stairs changing location every day and that everyone would go back to the first floor on day 9, which she decided to reveal to no one. At the same time, our heroes climbed the staircase and entered the first floor, that was decorated with an odd taste proper to demons. They then decided to take a look at their coordinates, yet the young man had no clue how to use the data despite knowing that they were on floor 3. His partner explained to him how X designated left and right while Y was for back and forth, theorizing that the unit they were using was meters. This mission, which seemed like a headache, made our hero want a cigarette, but the lady urged him not to do it as it would give away their location. With that being said, the two of them decided to take a look at the coordinates of the stair, which was the most precious intel. After some discreet scouting, they realized that the monster known as ramen soldiers appeared quickly. An So-young explained how she had met them in the castle ruins but didn't expect them here, which amazed our hero seeing how the ruins were difficult hunting grounds. But the lady explained that she only looked at the ruins without entering them, which is why she had survived this long, which seemed logical to our hero. The young man began to analyze the monsters, as rumor has it that they were powerful opponents to newbies who didn't concentrate on becoming stronger, meaning that he could take them on, but not the ruins on his own. He pointed out to his partner how they should be able to deal with the soldiers easily. Cha Moo-hyuk explained how he charged first while the girl waited for a chance to attack, and so he resorted to his first unique skill, in order to use the points of magic power to enhance the other stats, and by resorting to his skills to increase his life as his unique skill, he would be able to temporarily grant himself a rank 6 agility. Just then he called the giant lizard, who was confused. Timu then charged at Alibaba Killer Croc, that tried to defend itself using his sword. But the protagonist affirmed that this would be pointless, as he quickly cut the lizard with his claws. Yet upon seeing how little damage he inflicted, the hero assumed that he didn't pack enough punch. But with the monster now injured, our hero charged at him once again, leaving his partner amazed by how fast he was. With that, An So-young began to wonder if her ally was truly ranked 7. Just like that, the ramen soldier fell to the goblin claws. The relieved protagonist was surprised by how easy the task was while his partner pointed out how she wasn't needed. Our hero asked her to stop with these silly jokes, yet she affirmed to have never encountered someone this fast before. So he explained how it was the fruit of his skill that had a short duration. But as he seemed to have more to say and was struggling to let it out, the angered lady urged him to speak his mind, so he reminded her of her particular diet, leaving her confused at first, only to quickly remember that she was paired up with the monster eater. An lashed out at him for wanting to take a snack in this moment, but he affirmed that he needed the energy in order to keep going, and so he begged her to let him do his thing, seeing how they needed to open the monsters in order to collect the tower tokens. The redhead had no choice but to leave the man to exert his madness, who expressed his gratitude. Our hero rushed to the dead lizard, leaving her disgusted. Cha Mu-yuk recalled how this type had a core, and so he began dissecting it, before joyfully searching through its organs. Shortly after, our hero found his desired piece of the monster, that he immediately consumed to the girl's horror. This allowed him to enhance his endurance by a small amount that was still higher than Koilo's and would have been double if it was health. And while he was enthusiastic about the fast growth that it would offer, his partner urged him to search for the tokens. But seeing how excited he was, she was now more certain than ever that he was a psychopath. Shortly after, our hero was now in possession of a tower token that was similar to a coin. The lady immediately went on her way while he tried to ask her about the share of the gains. So she angrily explained that they should just do the normal thing and split it in half. With that, she urged him to get going as they needed to hunt as much as possible in order to guarantee survival. Despite his partner being annoyed, the young man who had no choice but to consume the marbles needed to keep his secret as long as possible. But he still hasn't scratched the possibility of telling her if it would be a necessity to win the event. Meanwhile, as a fight occurred on the second floor, the humans finally eliminated the beast, and were left pretty happy about their achievement that they found easy, as it meant that they could all acquire the needed number of kills. Meanwhile, their chief left in secret, as he planned on disposing of them on the last day in order to steal their kill and appear on the scoreboard in order to enter the final floor. Bae Yukshul knew very well that ranking was more important than survival, as according to the demon, efforts will be rewarded. He then took a look at the ranking and realized that he must imitate them by stealing the KDA of others. And just as he was lost in thought, he was approached by one of his teammates, snapping him back to reality and explaining to him how they might not encounter any teams on this easy floor filled with weak monsters. Yet as the bully gave credit to the team, he began to mark his teammate in secret for being happy to not have the chance to steal kills. The young one attributed all of their success to their chief before calling out certain someones on their decision, leaving the bully intrigued. The young man was referring to the protagonist and his teammates who foolishly charged ahead, refusing to team up with the chief. Bae Yukshul explained how the hero was someone he helped in the past and someone who also denied help this time in order to be with a girl, as he was reminded of his presence. The bully was jealous of the one who ran off with the girl, yet knew very well it was a lethal foolishness, as he was determined to kill him and his new girlfriend. Meanwhile, the desert swordsman charged up ahead, and delivered a powerful strike that the young man blocked with his claws. Our hero had a hard time holding up, due to the power of the monster. But just then, he was asked to retreat, and so he freed himself from the confrontation. Just as the ramen lizard was about to charge at him, he suddenly realized that he was the one being charged at, by none other than the redhead, who used a skill known as Strike of the Magic Warrior Rafaden. The monster tried to use his blade as a shield, but the crazed-looking one affirmed that it would be pointless, and so the sword of the monster began to crack, before ultimately breaking. Just like that, a swordsman had been stabbed by another. This left our hero blown away by the strength of his partner. An So-young pointed out how their styles, which weren't similar, worked well together. Cha Mu-yu called her out for stating that she wasn't needed despite all of her power after realizing that he needed to rework his plans to adjust to the girl's might. As the token was picked up, the girl reminded the boy that it was her turn to get it, which he urged her to do, before consuming the core, in order to enhance his strength while thinking of how chores were coming in these monsters that would continue to make him stronger if he kept hunting and consuming. The only problem was the plan they had to take them down. As the lady, who revealed herself to be a marauder, possessed an unblockable skill that he should be very wary of, on top of being the only one killing monsters. Our hero truly wanted to have faith in her, but upon remembering the advice of his master, he left his partner intrigued as he suggested a change of plan. As the deity realized that he deemed her unworthy of trust, our hero stated that he wanted to do things the better way. So after giving a small thought, An So-young accepted to hear him out. Surprised by her open mind, the young man stated that they should take a different approach than the one they required him to distract while she gets to kill. So instead, he proposed making the back of the monster face the lady in order to make it easier for her to stab. And when asked about her opinion on this plan, the warrior claimed that it would surely reassure the mastermind, as he wouldn't have to worry about her suddenly betraying him and would allow them to split the kills in half. And so she angrily decided to proceed once he tried to defend himself, only for our hero to be met with a dark gaze that left him shocked. An So-young explained how they teamed up for mutual interest, meaning that such ensuring plans weren't something to be justified as they needed to stick together until the end. The hero who offended the lady by accident left her with a sad expression. Shortly after, our hero was facing a soldier, and after the struggle, the young man began to overpower the creature. Upon seeing how it couldn't resist anymore, he quickly knocked it back before using the nails of the goblin chief in order to puncture it down. Just as the creature was severely bleeding, he pierced its armor with his powerful claws before resorting to all of his strength in order to lift it up before slamming it down. With the blood cleaned off from the claws, the fight was finally over. The girl called out the geek for perfectly imitating Wolverine, which he denied. Cha Mu-yuk then urged her to stop slacking, but she explained how they had already killed 3 monsters and that he was the overexcited one. After another of our hero's arguments, the lady began to think of how much stronger her ally had gotten in such a short time after the brilliant forest, to the point where the monsters here seemed like child's play to him. Meanwhile, the young man was left annoyed at accidentally finding the court he was searching for, while she began to think of how they both earned many points in the forest. Yet, while she was about to make a theory about his teacher, who might be the one behind his sudden growth, the hero claimed that it was her turn to get the coin. He asked her what was on her mind so that she got so distracted, yet she affirmed to not have reacted, seeing how she always approached the one she trusts. Only then did both of them blush upon realizing what she said. The young man urged her to say it back while his partner claimed that she wanted to have a meal. He tried to ask her once again, only to be interrupted by the one who wanted to close the subject, claiming that nutrition was essential for hunting. Thus, he agreed to have a meal. An So-young asked him about his water reserve, claiming to not have brought much, to which she responded by revealing to only have one bottle. This made the girl mock him for assuming that there would be water in this dungeon, yet he affirmed that there is a nearby fountain. But as the lady explained how this water was too mysterious and shady to drink, the young man pointed out how she must not possess a certain item. While the water was definitely confusing, the hunter reached into his pocket in order to showcase his purification powder, a cheap item that should be bought in masses that makes almost any water good to drink. An So-young claimed to have only entered the dungeon with the essentials and combat items before giving the lady the powder that should last until the end of the event. The shocked girl tried to argue that she should pay him for the powder, yet the boy affirmed to have many more of this cheap item. She tried to argue that purification powder was rather precious in this dungeon, meaning that she now owed him, so he revealed that it was the reason behind this kindness. Cha Mu-yuk explained how much he had reflected on the concept of faith upon entering this dungeon, claiming to have found it weird to see the girl adapt so easily to the two attackers that she didn't hesitate to terminate, wondering if she would have done the same on Earth. According to the hero, this continent was a different world that affected their philosophy and that some things remain the same yet to change. The girl failed to grasp the relation between these words and their current situation, so he explained how she was the reason behind everything he had done. She was left surprised as he pointed out how she had always been quick to make decisions as if she already knew what must be done. He also claimed that she was stronger than him, which is why her will frightened him, as it meant change. But in reality, she was still the same one protecting her morals. Cha Mu-hyuk affirmed that she didn't owe him anything, seeing how she was his beacon of hope and that he wished to protect their values in this land until the end. And so he expressed his gratefulness once again towards the lady before claiming that he still didn't trust her and that he was only giving her the powder she had earned. Cha Mu-hyuk finally understood where the young man was coming from before looking at his gift and affirming that she shall not misuse it. Shortly after, An So-young felt grateful to have condensed energy capsules despite them lacking the warm feeling of real food, which is why the protagonist made a suggestion, claiming that the snake jerky he offered her was truly delicious, only for her to decline and ask what he was doing. The young man revealed he was looking at the rankings, which the lady found pointless as they couldn't even reach it. Upon taking a look at the list, some of its names left the hero uneasy. Cha Mu-yuk, who noticed that his teacher was in 4th place, began to wonder about the secret behind reaching the top ranks. He then began to recall how his master described the hunt as an awful place. The man claimed to have achieved great success, and to not have revealed it in order to not seem prideful, and that his well usage of the class Marauder led him to the peaks he once reached. The man then asked his disciple to do whatever he can without hesitation in order to survive the hellhole, and explained that failing to do so would render him a one-limb man just like him, before affirming to him that he should do what needs to be done. Just then, he was brought back to reality by his partner, who claimed that they should try to locate the exit. Cha Mu-yuk began to think of how he didn't want to embrace evil, despite kindness not being welcomed in this place. Our protagonist wanted to gain power in order to live as he pleases, before thinking of how he would continue to do his thing without sparing any effort, thinking that this was the meaning behind the words of his teacher. Thus, he was once again determined to gain power. After some time, the exit had finally been located. I want you to point out how they had spent half a day in this level, while his partner stated the distance they had traveled. She then explained that they had walked 4.5 kilometers, and that they needed to walk 2.5 more in order to exit the dungeon. And as the protagonist pointed out how they had been lost in this labyrinth for 13 hours, he pointed out that this magic tower is much bigger than it seemed. Cha Mu-yuk, who realized that they couldn't approach the exit due to the risk of meeting other teams, was asked to not forget the coordinates of the exit. Our heroes then recalled the enforcer claiming that their location would be revealed every 24 hours, meaning that they only had 11 left. So the lady proposed to take the stairs. The young man pointed out how the 24 hours would be reset after climbing floors, while his partner stated that it would be best for farming to stay a long time on a single floor. And as the core consumer pointed out how the monsters here were rewarding, his partner brought up sleep, claiming that 6 hours should be enough, which the hero agreed with before pointing out how they would still have 5 free hours. With that being said, the two of them decided to use their remaining free time in order to farm as much as possible. And so our heroes decided to charge in once again, while the protagonist realized that they had just enough time to kill 50 lizards, meaning that he could at least get 40 cores that would greatly boost his progress. The thought of the rewards made him crack a weird smile that creeped out his partner. Shortly after, the 5 hours had come to an end. As the young man claimed to be exhausted, his partner stated that it was amazing of them to hunt for 18 hours straight. Cha Mu-yuk found the results very pleasant, as they had earned 86 tokens on top of his stats, having greatly been boosted due to his marble diet. He was even left overjoyed upon looking at his window panel, as keeping on this growth rate until the next day would allow his skill rush to make all of his stats except magic rank 6, he thought he would be invincible for 5 minutes. With that being said, the protagonist was once again glad by the choice he made upon picking his unique skill. He decided to keep his progress a secret, as it was too early to reveal the hidden effects of the course to his partner. Just then, the redhead advised him to always look ahead in case any powerful opponent appeared, so the young man claimed to be already wary. Shortly after, they had arrived at level 4 of the tower, and while the girl found it odd that it looked like your mind, she was left intrigued by her partner, claiming it to be convenient. So he explained how they could use the many items here in order to build a secret shelter where they could safely sleep. But the warrior affirmed that this would be impossible, as anything big enough to contain the two of them would be too suspicious. Realizing the error of his ways, the core consumer proposed to dig a pit instead. And upon seeing how his partner was confused, he explained that this was the underground hole that soldiers used for sneak attacks. An So-young quickly assumed that he wasn't as young as he looked and the military officer, so he explained how he learned this trick on TV. The lady chuckled and proposed to proceed without losing track of time as they had 24 hours ahead of them. Cha Moo-hyuk realized that floor 2 and 3 shared the same coordinate system, and as he rushed to locate the perfect location for the pit to save as much time as possible, the lady reminded him that they had nothing to dig with. But just as he began to theorize that this mine must have a shovel, he was suddenly left to blush as his partner grabbed him by the shoulder, asking him to get down and turn his gaze. The protagonist tried to explain that he was startled, yet the lady urged him to look where she pointed, and so he did what she said, and quickly noticed that there was a fallen dwarf in these mines. An So-young back 13 made to stay hidden. The core consumer, who couldn't see well due to the dark, explained how dwarves hunted impacts unlike this one while the sword made them propose to stay hidden. She was then left shocked as the hero managed to perceive that the enemy wasn't with a group. The protagonist explained how he had the eyes of his good friend, that he only realized the potential as he had never hunted without light before. Cha Moo-hyuk was rendered with a sad expression as his late goblin friend managed to help him even in the mines. Seeing how this level had a dirt floor and that the monster possessed a shovel seemed very well placed to the point where it was odd. Yet the Korean Wolverine pulled out his claws, claiming that they couldn't observe forever, as he and his teammate charged at the fallen dwarf in order to uncover the upcoming events. Shortly after, the protagonist was amazed by how light the shovel truly was, as it seemed pretty heavy in the hands of their last spray, according to him, as his partner urged him to dig the pit. Just then, the warrior pointed out that it was now time for his meal, but was left amazed upon seeing that he was a picky eater, seeing how dwarves looked too much like humans. Having expected this reaction, the annoyed protagonist suggested to his happy partner to find a place to cook. Shortly after, they stumbled upon a place that seemed perfect to avoid surprise attacks. Cha Moo-hyuk pointed out how they had spent half an hour on the 4th floor, before starting to dig and instructing the girl on how to make her hole less suspicious, only for her to affirm that she knew what she was doing. And when asked about the desired duration of the nap, the good theme that 5 hours would be enough. The core consumer proposed to use some stuff in order to conceal the holes they just made, so the lady proposed to use the nearby minecarts. So upon moving the items, our heroes were left satisfied, as they had just made the perfect hiding spot that would have served as a great base if they didn't have to move every day. The girl, who realized that they had wasted too much time, proposed to immediately go to bed while the protagonist was left for it as they had no alarm to wake them up in time, only to be reminded that in this continent, they had been waking up early without resorting to technology. Even so, he proposed that the first to wake up alarms the other. An So-young accepted before pointing out how she had never expected to sleep in a hole. With that being said, each of the heroes went to his pit. Our protagonist, who didn't have much space, realized that he also didn't have the luxury to complain. He then began to think of how his new life forced him to wake up early without the use of alarms, making him wonder whether he had adapted or changed, as this would have been impossible for him back on Earth. But he assumed that gaining power would give him the answer he needed, and while wondering about strength, he saw his partner, who pointed out how he didn't lift a finger to prevent the murder before giving him her dark, cold gaze. Suddenly, the protagonist woke up in a cold sweat due to this nightmare that left him with a feeling of unease. The protagonist realized that they hadn't been spotted yet. Our hero then confirmed that they were alone, and that they had reached the 5-hour limit. The young man began to complain about sleeping in a dirt pit to the point where he began to miss his hut. With that being exactly decided, he woke up the girl, and upon seeing how there was no response, he knocked once again, trying to wake her up, only to be met by a blade in the face. The confused young man asked for the cause behind this reaction. The girl took a small moment of silence. She explained how it was only natural for her to be ready at all times and that the reaction of the angry boy meant that they were in the clear. With that being said, the two of them resumed their journey, before confirming that they were alone once again. The lady expressed how amazing she was that the plan of her partner was actually effective, only for him to affirm that he was no fool. She then began to wonder about the monster that they would face, seeing how they were reset every day while the protagonist claimed to be wondering about the tokens. After almost revealing his thirst for cores by accident, the girl teased him about one thing, monster hearts. And as the joke got on his nerves, the young lady began to chuckle. Shortly after, our heroes felt alerted. The protagonist began to wonder about the adversity, and was left overjoyed, seeing how they were ramen soldiers. Yet despite those being monsters that they already knew how to hunt, it would be difficult to take them on. They seemed to be more numerous compared to the last floor. This could endanger any adventure, according to the lady, as these creatures would be rather difficult to slay once they grouped up. So the Wolverine pulled out his claws while thinking of how they needed to gain power as fast as possible, as his partner urged him to not jump into danger. Even so, he activated his 2 unique skills, before charging right up ahead and asking his partner to await his signal as she tried to stop him. Just then, the monsters realized that they were being attacked by someone who knew very well that he could only take 2 of them at the same time. The young man knew very well that even with the help of his teammate, it would be difficult to deal with 3 lizards, seeing how her power could only be used with an opening. Thus, our hero judged it wise to gain power as quickly as possible by using the ramen soldiers. With that being said, he resorted to his goblin claws while being determined to consume all of their cores before they faded away. Just like that, the first monster had been stabbed in the chin. The young man adjusted his position, before charging at the second, and stabbing him in the same way. Just like that, 2 lizard men fell to goblin claws. So-young was amazed to see that her partner had gained power once again upon seeing him take 2 lizards at once. After a quick butchery, our hero had his first meal of the day, and felt that the fact that he had found 2 cores was a sign of fortune. With that being said, the young man claimed that he was thankful for the meal, while the lady was left with a dark expression. As she began to shiver in fear, An So-young proposed to move quickly, which confused the young man who just got a stamina boost. The lady explained that they needed to move early in order to gather intel about the other floors and the monsters residing in each of them. Our hero tried to argue that they still had half a day to spend here, so she affirmed that this wasn't about time. Seeing how they had more than 100 kills each, they should focus on gaining power and surviving, and that intel that doesn't come from Haunt was the best way to do that. Despite agreeing with her logic, the young man still wanted to farm a little more, as keeping up the pace would allow him to earn himself rank 6 health at the end of the hunt, as well as greatly boosting his other stats. So he decided to convince the girl to stay a little longer here by claiming that it would be for the best to not abandon the monsters they were most familiar with. An So-young claimed that it would be in their best interest to know about the other monsters as well as the other teams, while the protagonist claimed that he only had 86 kills. And despite the lady thinking that it wasn't much of a big deal, it would be for the best for him to reach 100, as one couldn't predict the future. The warrior claimed that he took a liking to the lizards, so he affirmed that it wasn't the case and that he just wanted to farm the monsters he knows the most about. And when asked if he didn't have any ulterior motives, the hero affirmed that he was only trying to survive this event as smoothly as possible. The girl was left to think, and she claimed that he only needed a little time, leaving her with no choice but to agree on the condition of quickly leaving once he was done, as intel was crucial, seeing how things would keep on getting trickier. An So-young realized that she was forced to accept, as discord would only bring them harm. Cha Muyuk, who realized that something was weird, began to fear the worst, as his partner looked at him strangely. Shortly after, another lizard had been stabbed, by none other than the protagonist. When asked if he had enough, he confirmed, leaving the lady angry, seeing how he had killed 17 more than needed and wasted 2 hours. The core consumer tried to argue that it was only natural, as they were perfecting their teamwork before bringing off the tokens to console the rushing lady. He also realized that he had lost control of himself due to his deep desire to level up, and so he was left to catch up as his partner charged up right ahead. Later on, the warrior tried to take a peek from behind the wall, only to find yet another lizard man, left her particularly angry as the hero charged up alone once again. Later on, his partner began to complain about how he had taken down 8 monsters while roaming the dungeon, and then she lashed out at him. Our hero claimed that he was only distracting himself with a small side quest, but just then, he noticed something intriguing that he quickly pointed out to his partner, who assumed that it was another monster. But upon seeing it, she was left amazed, as there was nothing here to be seen. Our hero asked her if this truly was the location of the staircase, as he recited the exact coordinates. The girl looked at her watch to confirm once again, and upon noticing that they had made no mistake, the both of them realized what had truly happened. As the enforcer didn't inform them about this, their case is changing locations every day, leaving them annoyed. The lady then looked at her watch, worried. The both of them realized that they were on the clock and they didn't have time to waste on any enemy whatsoever, meaning that they should rush to the new location. With that being said, the lady charged up ahead once again without thinking much of it. The hero, disappointed by the wasted course and who was irritated by the enforcer, realized that it was urgent to locate the exit. Just then, they both spotted monsters at 12 o'clock, leaving them irritated as the encounter occurred sooner than expected. With that being said, the monsters charged at the heroes, who quickly diced them off before continuing the rushing search, and so they kept on slashing their way into the 4th floor. And just as one of them was about to hit the lady, the creature was taken from behind, by none other than the protagonist himself. The tired An So-young began to wonder about the location of the exit, so the hero urged her to not waver, as they had already spent 20 hours in this dungeon. The warrior assumed that the boy who got her so far possessed great stamina due to his class, while thinking of how reliable he was despite looking like a total moron. At the beginning, the protagonist, who grows at an amazing speed, already possessed great stats that rivaled hers. Yet now she feels as he was now far up ahead, seeing how he can take 2 Roman soldiers on his own. The warrior also realized that his strength must be a fruit of his diet, which left her frustrated at seeing how he wouldn't share the secret with her. This made her look at the gift he gave her and reflect, only then to be snapped back to reality by the protagonist, as they had finally stumbled upon the stairs. While the hero pointed out how they needed to relocate the exit every day, his partner explained how this must have been done in order to confuse contestants. Seeing how everything resets daily and that contestants only had 24 hours to spend on each floor, those who couldn't keep track of time must be left confused. So-young proposed to go to the next floor in order to gather some intel and asked the hero if he agreed with her. The protagonist then claimed that they should count time from the second they set foot on this floor, before accepting to move on, which left his partner intrigued, having assumed that he still wanted to farm a little more. The warriors recalled the words of the hunter regarding one keeping his values and hope, making her wonder if these things truly existed in this continent. Even so, An So-young decided to rely on her current power, the self, to gain in strength as she set this matter aside until she really pays the favor. Cha Mu-yuk pointed out that it was still the same floor, while his partner explained that only the monster differed. Just then, our hero's partner pointed to the monsters they recognized as the common mountain monster known as gnolls. As the lady explained how challenging those monsters would be, seeing how they would call for backup, the hero proposed to avoid them and get to the 2nd floor. The main reason behind this escape was the fact that the mountain monster didn't have any core, making him wonder if the lizards were the only ones. Our hero stated that each floor was home to a type of monster, meaning that there were 4 types in total, but the lady claimed that it was 5, counting the ice dwarves. This made him wish that the 4th and last type would have course, when suddenly, our heroes heard a sudden sound. An So-young asked the hero if he still wanted to go to level 2. Soy explained how this would be good for intel. Upon arriving at the 2nd floor, as the hero pointed out the odd decoration, his partner was still wondering about the source of the sound. The core consumer proposed to locate the source, so his partner looked at the time, and explained that they had a lot of time before the big reset, before suggesting to explore this floor a little. An So-young pointed out that they also needed to take a look at the other floors and that they couldn't waste time, which he agreed with. With that being said, our heroes charged right ahead, with the warrior using her sword in order to make some cracks in the walls. Cha Moo-hyuk praised her on this Hansel and Gretel move as she explained how this aimed to reduce the searching time, before calling out the hero on letting her keep track of time and the stair location on her own, making the protagonist annoyed by the fact that he always forgot such details. Even so, he couldn't help but find it reassuring that he had someone to rely on for the first time to make up for his mistakes. Our heroes noticed that this floor was almost deprived of monsters, only for the warrior to be alerted by some kind of noise. And before the hero could talk, she shushed him in order to hear the strange sound. Upon realizing that this was an ominous voice, the protagonist pointed out that this must be the signal that alerts teams of anyone who stayed on the same floor for too long. With that being said, he theorized that the source of the sound must be their watches. Cha Moo-hyuk supposed to take a look at the monsters and the adventurers they were attacking, so the lady asked him to not get caught. Upon taking a peek, they found a bunch of contestants struggling against a great number of monsters. The one with the flaming red sword gritted his teeth. The bully raised his blade in order to launch an attack. Wondering about the reason the floor suddenly got infested with zombies, he blamed his failure on his 7 companions and regretted not making it to the stairs in time, as they weren't told that their location would change daily. Bae Yuk-shul was left in a tough situation as they were on the clock and needed to find the stairs, but the incoming zombies made this impossible. Just as the bully explained that he would charge right ahead and leave those who couldn't follow behind, he noticed something odd, as some of the zombies were pointing at him. With that being said, the adventurer resorted to magic in order to blast the dark creatures away. An explained that she had a hunch about the trapped one, before counting 40 zombies, while her partner claimed that the incoming zombies were making him feel unsafe. The lady explained how the powerful man who had 3 skills was most likely the only one to make it out alive. Bae Yuk-shul possessed coordinated explosion, weapon enhancement, shadow shield, and possibly skin strengthening as well, making An realize that he might truly be the hope of the Black Dragon clan, seeing how much backed up he seemed, as well as the great magic reserves that he showcased. The bully was left annoyed by the zombies. He burst out in anger while activating a blue aura, leaving the protagonist shocked. Bae Yuk-shul then began to blast and cut the monsters at will. The hero recognized their skill as Gluttony of Mage Romaha, which was a unique skill of the settler class. This power would allow the bully to temporarily increase stats by stealing points from his opponent, making it great to create striking opportunities. Our hero realized that this power would be a pain in the neck for him, seeing how it would interfere with his own skills. But upon looking at the current state of the battle, the young man realized that victory was still possible. And just as An So-young proposed to leave the 8 men to their fate, she was left stunned upon hearing the protagonist suggest coming to their rescue. And while she was having a hard time believing it, he confirmed his suggestion once again. The amazed warrior began to wonder about the plan of the hunter, who cracked up a clever and mischievous smile. With the zombie being slashed, assumed that they had finally cleared a path, only to be met with more undead. Seeing how he was being overwhelmed by zombies of all creatures, the man assumed that it was the end of the line for him. He began planning on leaving his team behind in order to escape and join another. Yet the only problem was that he didn't know the location of the exits. But just then a scream was heard. The protagonist, who claimed to have just arrived, pretended to be frightened by the zombie horde. Seeing the new lucky arrival, after being attracted by the sound most likely, gave hope to the body. And so he offered the young man to become a part of his team if he faced the zombies away, only to be left annoyed by the hero's refusal, who faced death by zombies. The protagonist then screamed to someone to regain the stairs, leaving everyone shocked, as it meant awareness of the coordinates of the exit. This detail also caught the attention of the other contestants, who followed the protagonist and urged him for help, only for our hero to turn to them, and casually flip them over with a wide smile, leaving all of them particularly annoyed and shocked, especially the team leader, who tore his way through the zombies, determined to eradicate the one who mocked him, in the most brutal way possible. Just like that, the party of adventurers made their way through the zombies. The angry team leader urged his team to move at once. The headache caused by his simultaneous activated skills was overshadowed by his unyielding rage, and so he tore his way through the zombies. Yet after some time, he realized that he had lost track of our hero as one of his lackeys pointed out how the undead were gaining ground. The team leader urged him to shut up as he was searching for the guide to freedom, who found himself face to face with a zombie that he immediately kicked away. The bully ordered the bullied one to come closer. Bae Yuk-shul, once particularly annoyed by the fact that the young man wasn't powerful enough to slay a single undead, noticed one of them next to him, that he quickly slashed without hesitation while thinking of how the weakling dared to run away from him, leaving him with violent urges towards the hero. After some running, the team leader asked his man if anyone was missing, so one of his lackeys explained how everyone was injured but alive. The bully decided to satisfy himself with this result, seeing how they were in a lethal situation. And just as he began to think of how crucial it was to locate the exit, his eyes fell upon it. And just as the adventurers were filled with happiness and relief, the strong one reminded them that they still had to escape the floor first. The tired leader explained how they would be heading to level 1 instead of level 3. The undead were about to unleash yet another charge, and so the terrified adventurers escaped the level and closed the door behind them, leaving the undead hungry and unsatisfied. Upon arriving at level 1, the bully realized how bizarre the structure of the tower was, seeing how its first level was a cave. And just as he wanted to resume his search for the lackey, he was suddenly approached by one of his men, whom he urged to search for the one who mocked him. Yet the young man affirmed that they needed to reorganize themselves first, seeing how the troops needed to take some rest and tend to their wounds in order to be able to fight once again. Bae had no choice but to resonate with this logic, as rest was currently an urgent matter. Thus he asked his men to find a place away from the entrance in order to avoid opponents. Meanwhile, our hero heard it all from behind the wall, and was amazed. as well as glad that he had correctly predicted that the adventurers would head towards the first floor. So he asked them to do their best in order to make it out alive, even if he wished for their deaths. Shortly after, he approached his partner, who launched out at him for not arriving on time, so he explained how he had to stay hidden until the enemy left. Cha Mu-yuk began to brag about how his plan to rescue the enemy without them noticing was a success, and claiming that the zombie made his act more realistic. The weirded out girl decided to ironically praise him. Our hero asked her for the reason she commenced without him, despite the risk of being overwhelmed by zombies, and so she pointed to the sound coming from up above, before explaining how another team who received the penalty must have attracted the zombies to them, which the protagonist found sad, before cheerfully proposing to extract the reward from the corpse of the undead. Shortly after, an adventurer on the Ring of Death found himself surrounded by zombies, and so he gathered the last bit of fight he had in him, before charging at the creatures, only to get bitten in the neck. Upon seeing him being eaten, the heroes realized that they couldn't do anything for him. The girl proposed to come forth after the zombies went away, which our hero agreed with. After some time, the adventurer had been torn apart, so the team of two approached the crime scene, and realized that the foreign adventurers had taken out many zombies. Even so, they didn't cause as many casualties as the team of the bully. Our hero was left overjoyed as his inventory was almost full, and when his partner called him out for his happiness, he affirmed that the loot cost a fortune. The lady began to look at the token and began to think, while her teammate pointed out how they had collected all of them, and that only some items weren't sorted between the two of them. Shortly after, the protagonist, with sparkle in his eyes, asked the lady once again if he could get all of the watches, so she explained how she didn't care about the scoreboard. One asked if he didn't want any armor. Our protagonist claimed that he would content himself with the hatchet. That didn't look good on him, according to the lady, leaving him irritated. With that being said, I decided to take a look at the kills inside the watches. The young man was amazed to find 629 kills inside the 4 watches. Yet this was too little, as the 10th place had almost 4,500 kills more than him. But he believed that he could surpass him in the 7 days that were left. Our hero, who didn't want to get his hands dirty, also needed to take care of the bully, who would use the sheer number of his team to overwhelm everyone else before betraying his own allies and stabbing them in the back in order to take everyone's kills. But this would probably leave the man injured, as the one he just betrayed would surely try to defend themselves. Our hero aimed to use this opportunity as a chance to take the bully out. The exhausted one then affirmed that he needed to rest, making his partner point out how his trip to the first floor didn't change anything. Seeing how they needed to take a 5-hour-long nap, he proposed to go to the first floor, which she immediately accepted. Our hero realized that the first floor, which was a cave with dirt, was home to the dwarves who had shovels that they could use to make holes. His partner pointed out how dark the staircase was, leaving him to tease her about being scared of it. The lady firmly affirmed that she wasn't afraid of the dark despite not having lenses like him. Our hero began to wish to stumble upon lizards, who were the only monsters here with cores after the random reset that wasn't too much of a hassle. The reset was something that the hero must always think of. Once on the first floor, the lady proposed to find a monster with a shovel and a good place to spend the night, while the hero estimated that they wouldn't meet the enemy team. After the shovel was found, and the hard work was done, our heroes had finally dug their sleeping hole. As the lady pointed out how she counted 2 other teams, the protagonist explained how the first was from China and the second one was from Japan. An So-young noticed that everyone must be respecting the 24-hour penalty, as they didn't hear any sound, which the hero only realized. Cha Mu-yuk realized that the team they looted was the only one dead, and seeing how little interaction there was between teams, the final event must be a big gathering. He then judged that the best plan for a team of 2 like them would be to let the other teams slay each other before taking care of the winner in order to climb the scoreboard. But just then our hero was left baffled by his own thoughts, as they were those of a devil, only to be addressed by the lady. He asked her to repeat her words, so she asked him once again if he wished to return to Earth. Cha Mu-yuk affirmed that this was the reason behind his journey, before asking the lady to cheer up upon seeing her express her doubts. As he mentioned how some grew strong upon staying here for more than a decade, she explained how she had lost hope as those in question had been trapped for 13 years. The lady was more terrified by the fact that she had accustomed herself to this place rather than being imprisoned here forever. She revealed how this place made killing something easy for her, and made her wary of people, as anyone could attack at any second. In this place, it was sometimes entertaining. This led her to conclude that this continent had morphed their powers and personalities, which is why she fixated on a purpose. The protagonist was left shocked upon hearing that she aimed to locate the ruler of the demons. In order to ask him about the reason behind making them kill each other in this place and even rough him off, she refused to respond. She claimed that becoming powerful would be difficult, yet it would be all worth it if she could just humiliate and insult the demon god. Upon hearing this, the hero was blown away. He cracked a smile, before affirming that this was a wonderful purpose to live for. The boy also wanted to ask the ruler of the demons for the reason behind his actions, and seeing how gaining more power would deprive surviving of its satisfying taste, it would be for the best to go against the will of the demons, and keep gaining power until they could finally face and defeat the demon god. Later on, while lying down, our hero realized that he got overexcited as this place wasn't fully similar to a game, meaning that there was no final boss. Only one thing was certain, and it was the fact that everyone here would eventually change, and adapt to the idea that death was a part of this world. He was also aware of the reason behind his partner revealing her dreams. Back then, she explained how she was too scared of change to realize that she wasn't on her own, but all changed upon meeting the protagonist, who was left intrigued at how she firstly assumed him to be a psychopath. An So-young explained how the boy wasn't different from the others and how she wished to be similar to him, seeing how he reminded her of her loved ones. Cha Mu-yuk brought up the possibility of him being a liar all along, so she explained how she wasn't going to blindly trust him. claiming that it was due to her trust issues that even affected her faith in herself. Seeing how powerful the protagonist was, she decided to ask him a selfish favor, which consisted of seeing his values and adhering to them until the end. And when asked why she decided to have such an emotional talk, she claimed that the moment felt right, stating that it was a hunch before going to sleep. The young man began to wonder if he was the first here the girl opened her heart to, so he began to think of how there must be a cause to their new philosophy, blaming it all on the demon god, who he was determined to find despite the difficulties and the fact that he might get slain by a monster before encountering him, as well as the possibility of completely changing. But until then, until he meets his target, he would always harbor a feeling of rage. Shortly after, a group of contestants walked by our hero's hideout, and one of them was quickly left intrigued. When his teammate asked him about the matter, he explained how he was sensing another presence. The friend of the young man quickly realized that he used his sense of smell to locate the others and asked him if they were far, which he denied. The man assumed that their targets must have passed by this point, which is why they should look for them before proceeding ahead. And with that being said, the enemy team walked away. Once they were far enough, the rock was tilted. Our heroes had confirmed that they were now once again alone. An So-young stretched herself while Cha Mu-yuk pointed out the time, explaining how they had less than 6 hours on this floor, which wouldn't have been a problem if it weren't for the staircase changing locations. Later on, while walking on the first floor, the hero expressed his desire to meet Ramon's soldiers, making him inspired to call him out for relaxing, claiming that they might stumble upon a horde. Hearing the hero claim that the two of them could handle it together, the warrior began to wonder if he was laid back or just a complete moron. But just then, our hero was left startled upon having spotted a group of lizards. Seeing how there were 3 of them, the young ones quickly realized that the number of monsters increased by 1 with each day passing. The girl asked him if he wanted to proceed with the regular plan, but our hero decided to change the strategy. Claiming that he would distract them and leave her with a final blow, he affirmed that he had faith in her with a wide smile, leaving her flustered with a blush. The protagonist wanted to use this opportunity to gain power, as he knew very well that he could handle 3 ramen soldiers on his own, and with that, he charged at the monsters, immediately slashing 2 of the 3. And before the last reptile could even understand, the lady charged at him. And before the monster could even realize it, he was stabbed in the gut by a human girl. Just like that, the 3 reptiles had been defeated. Our protagonist pointed out how this was easier than expected and how crucial experience was. But his partner knew very well that his sudden increase in speed wasn't the fruit of experience, and as he proposed to dissect the monsters in order to get their rewards, she realized how this was related to his diet. Just as the protagonist was lost in his thoughts, she asked him if this was a skill. When asked to elaborate, An So-young explained how the particular diet of the protagonist was the reason behind his immense progress, leaving him horrified. The young man assumed that it was now time to tell the truth, as she must have grown suspicious of him, seeing how much course he had consumed without mentioning how he would have eventually revealed the secret to her. An So-young took his silence as a refusal to answer her question, but the young man affirmed that it wasn't the case, as he was just curious about her question. The warrior explained how she also sought strength, claiming that he must have a skill that gets triggered upon eating. This intrigued our hero. Just then, he recalled a skill that fits this description, a skill that is considered very rare and that enhances one's stats by a small amount upon eating. And so, seeing how the girl was pressuring him, he decided to use this skill, which is almost impossible to acquire for a newbie, to cover up the truth. Yet just as he was about to utter his lie, he began to hesitate, thinking that the lady had proven herself worthy of trust, only to remember his master affirming that trust was dangerous as it makes one lower his guard, comparing it to the blabber that one lets out of his mouth after getting drunk. And despite this causing only embarrassment in the real world, it would be lethal on the continent, as the core secret was a wild card that must stay hidden. With that being said, the protagonist affirmed using a skill. In the end, he decided to lie, falsely confirming the doubts of the girl regarding his fast growth. The young man was that flustered as his partner approached him, claiming that she just needed to make sure. And when asked about the place he obtained the skill, the young one claimed to have found it while hunting. Due to his amazing luck, the amazed lady stated that she was jealous of his good fortune. She explained how she had fallen and assumed that there was a lazy way for one to gain power, which the hero immediately denied. With that being said, the warrior suggested to the hunter to farm some more while looking for the stairs, which he accepted. Cha Mu-yuk was amazed by how easily she believed him, thinking that it wasn't time to reveal the truth to the one who knows he has hidden secrets. Seeing how his master firmly advised him to be wary of people, and seeing how the warrior was the type of person to do anything for power, he had to make sure she was worthy of the same trust he gives his master. Thus, he decided to keep on lying for the time being. Shortly after, a ramen soldier was hit with an axe on the head. His confused teammates, who spotted the attackers, quickly took a combat stance. Our hero complimented his partner on her increasing speed, stating that it was no time for praises. Shortly after, our hero opened the lizard in order to grab the core that he wanted, and upon consuming it, he realized that his stamina was now off rank 6, moving him very much overjoyed. The young man that he hated his suddenly lack of fatigue to the fact that his stamina had finally leveled up, thinking that this was some kind of after effect. Meanwhile, his partner, who looked tired, claimed that they should hurry and locate the exit, which the protagonist agreed with. Cha Mu-yuk, who felt as if he didn't need any sleep, began to search for the exits and quickly located it. He was also happy to see that they had 10 hours left in the dungeon, meaning that they had time before the location was given out. So he excitedly proposed to farm some more, but the girl said that she needed to rest as she was just a marauder who couldn't hear after having a mean. She then explained that she had many hearts and that she needed to sleep, making him apologize and suggest taking some rest on another level. Once on the stairs, Cha Mu-yuk proposed to head to floor 4 as it was the most comfortable for sleeping. The young man realized that he had been selfish by hunting with no regard to his partner. Once on the desired level, the hunter began to wish for the presence of the reptiles in it, complaining that they should spawn more. With everything being set for the nap, the girl explained that she desired to sleep more than 5 hours, claiming that she would need 7 hours in order to match the fast-growing protagonist. With that being said, each of them went inside their respective holes before bidding each other goodnight. Once inside, the young man found himself full of energy, so he decided to go outside for farming while keeping an eye open. While walking down the mines, he began to think of how rank 7 could only affect skills of the same rank, meaning that only stamina wouldn't be affected by the hunt. Cha Mu-hyuk decided to take this chance to increase his slow-evolving magic power, seeing how Rush had a much smaller reset time now. Just then, he stumbled upon a colony of fallen dwarfs, and just as he decided to use stamina points to increase his other stats, something went wrong, leaving him horrified as his unique skill wasn't working on his rank 6 attribute. Our hero still couldn't grasp the problem, only to be then spotted by the monsters, which left him alerted as all of them charged at him at once. The young man was left in a tough situation, and so despite not knowing why his skill glitched in such a manner, he decided to use this chance to measure his progress without his skill. That being said, monster and hunter charged at each other. One of the dwarves performed a quick slash that the protagonist evaded by a hair, and so the swift counterattack. 2 dwarves were easily decapitated. The hunter launched himself away from the final one before jumping back end closed first, and just like that, the 3 monsters had been entirely apprehended. Cha Mu-hyuk was first relieved as the fact that only 2 of them were using real weapons made the task possible. He also noticed that he could only take 3 dwarfs at once, meaning he had to enhance his fighting style without the use of skills. Even so, the hero wanted to know what was happening, as his fights would become a lot more difficult without the camouflage of the jewel lizard. Only then did he realize that this skill allowed him to tamper with the points of stats of the same rank. Forgetting this little detail made him feel like an idiot. The unique skill didn't work on stamina as it was the only rank 6 stat he had, which would make things more difficult, seeing how much he used to rely on its points. He also didn't want to bother his partner too much, so he decided to go solo for a short while, relying on his skills. And despite his wish to look for the lizard people once again, he would be rendered in a critical situation a few stumbles upon an enemy team while on his own. With that being said, he decided to hunt without using his skills until the dawn of the next day. Meanwhile, as An So-young was sleeping, she saw someone trying to grab her. Upon seeing this, she quickly kicked him in the family jewels, leaving him in agony as she began to run away. But just then, the girl was grabbed by the arm by the aggressor who pulled out his weapon, and with no way for her to move, she was about to get stabbed, only to wake up. With that, the lady opened her eyes in cold sweat as her partner claimed that she had slept for too long and that he was going to open the pit. She affirmed that she would come out shortly. Upon looking at the time, the warrior realized that she had been asleep for more than 7 hours. An So-young asked her partner how much sleep he got, to which he replied none, leaving her shocked as he explained how he just couldn't shut his eyes. The young man began to brag about his time in a going up rank, claiming it to be the reason behind his exhaustion suddenly disappearing. This left the girl even more baffled, and when asked when this stamina evolved, the hero affirmed that it did while they were hunting. After taking a look at his appearance and the blood on his axe, the girl asked him if he wanted to farm alone, which he confirmed, claiming to have been on his guard. He then began to explain how the monster was still appearing in packs of 3 and that this time it was the ramen soldiers, leaving her filled with frustration. But just as our hero was about to offer his partner some food, she burst out at him, screaming at him for going alone recklessly and putting himself in danger to the point where any harm that befalls him could affect his chances of surviving. So-young then asked the protagonist to take better care of her, his partner. The mention of the word partner confused the hero and startled the lady, who realized what she had just said. And so she quickly brushed it off before asking him to be careful and turning around in anger. The flustered lady, who still couldn't believe that she referred to him as partner, was surprised to see that he was taking on 3 lizards at once. As he apologized once again, she finally convinced herself that he was telling the truth. And with the final apologies, she decided to close the subject. The protagonist was left confused as he was asked for something. The warrior clarified that she wanted some of the jerky he was chewing on, which left him pleased. And so, as he handed her the food, she began to think of how nothing in this continent was worthy of trust. Before taking a bite, and stating to the cook that his food isn't as nasty as it looks, while thinking of how her new partner could be someone she could trust. 4 hours and 15 minutes into the 5th day, and the sun dawned on 23 survivors. The largest team in the contest, led by the bully, despite the hardships it had faced, managed to get back on its feet and recover due to potions. The second biggest team was this Chinese one with 7 people, followed by the Japanese with 6. 5 days into the contest, and only 4 people had fallen. But things truly got complicated after the 5th day, as the teams, overjoyed, did not clash or encounter each other. Meanwhile, our heroes found the staircase. The warrior proposed to take some time off on the Null's floor, which was more challenging than expected according to our hero. The mountain monsters, who were known for calling backup, were rather irritating, and the tight corridors of the labyrinth made it almost impossible to slay 3 of them at once before they could request help. With that, the protagonist, wishing to have more allies, proposed to find a place for sleeping as only 6 hours remained until the reset. His curious partner asked him if he wasn't going for lizards anymore, so he affirmed that he was too tired, and that he only got an energy boost from ranking up his energy. But just then, they began to hear Chinese coming from the staircase. The protagonist silently suggested going back their steps, which the lady agreed with, and so they quickly climbed the stairs with the enemy behind them, before hiding on the 2nd floor. When asked about their next move, Haran explained how it was best to rest before the reset. The man then turned to his team and asked them if it suited them to rest for an hour before resuming their way, and none had any objections. With that being said, the Chinese team took a break. The hero then began to judge their leader on his poor decision to make his team rest near the entrance, but his partner assumed that it might be intentional. Our heroes quickly recognized the powerful-looking Howren as the boss of the team, despite having despicable gazes according to the young man. Just then, a bald man approached the leader and asked him if it wouldn't be wiser to rest far from the entrance, to which he replied by claiming that someone was already on guard duty, when suddenly, they were approached by someone who pointed out the great leading skills of Howren. The lady then pointed out how the members of the team were being considered pawns for their master, who wanted to climb the ranks. Howren asked Renhwa to keep her mouth shut in order to keep her life. He then explained how everything was growing great and how he was making sure to keep his stuff while rested as they progressed pretty well, before claiming that what matters in this tower were the rankings, meaning that they needed to gain power, and that the three of them were the core of the team that earned the rewards. The leader then gently placed his hand on the lady's neck and stated that if she ruined their plans, that must be executed. Before many grabbed it, that he wouldn't even spare her if he had to rework his plans. The shocked Renhwa then cracked this smile, and gently grabbed his face, calling him interesting before revealing her desire to see the plan perfectly executed. This scene earned the both of them the jealousy of the single ones. With that being said, Howren praised the clever woman. Meanwhile, our heroes who saw everything labeled the both of them as a couple of psychopaths. Muyuk pointed out how the man was after the scoreboard while his partners suggested to come out once they were gone. But the protagonist began to think of how they would stumble upon the Chinese team sooner or later. So Young then stated that the howling monsters would be a problem, which is why they should take a small break, only to realize something intriguing, as the monster eater was smiling like a madman. And when asked about it, he claimed that it was only a normal smile. With that being said, the warrior had no choice but to drop the matter. When asked if he was planning on fighting the Chinese team, the hero affirmed that he wasn't such a big fool. So he whispered his strategy to his partner, who burst out at him for the madness he just spoke, leading him to have no choice but to silence her. Cha Moo-hyuk explained how they were bound to meet this team who would kill anyone in their way, seeing how they were focused on the rankings, and their leader would be annoying due to his strength and intelligence, meaning that his plan required the dog-like monsters would be perfect to gain the upper edge. And so he grabbed his partner's hand, leaving her startled with her right face as he claimed that he was speaking from the bottom of his heart, before affirming that her presence was certainly going to make his plan work. Upon hearing this, the girl recomposed herself, and angrily asked the boy to let go of her hand. The tsundere who agreed to the plan asked the protagonist to stay out of harm as she would abandon him in that case, leading him to express his gratitude. Shortly after, as the Chinese team progressed to the dungeon, the wild one assumed that there were many contestants on the floor with them due to the constant howling. This was only more confusing as it didn't seem that the 24-hour penalty had been activated. Haren began to think of how odd it was that the noise started shortly after they resumed their way, and upon thinking of how locating someone in this means was difficult, he realized what was truly happening. The bald one asked him if there was something that mattered, only for the team leader to urge his allies to hide as they had fallen into a trap, but all were left too shocked to react. So the team leader realized that the trap had already closed. At the same time, someone was running, with a group of monsters behind him. That was none other than our hero, who began to think of how the best thing to do in these games was to take down big packs of monsters. The plan of the protagonist was to wait for the Chinese to resume their way, then wait for them to enter a region of the maze they knew about and that didn't have many exits. Once this had been done, the lady gave the signal. The heroes quickly began to run, before pulling out their weapons, and began slashing left and right in order to lure the monsters. Just like that, the gnoll began to howl. Was a girl having marked the walls and memorized the area she would be needed for this plan that required quickness and a great knowledge of the map. Our heroes should be able to lure enough monsters to make the plan work before the enemy could understand it. Meanwhile, the team leader urged his team to move at once, but the bald man had his doubts seeing how the monsters were following an enemy. Yet Howren affirmed that the monster noises were getting closer, meaning that someone was guiding the monsters to their location, and before they could even react, the trap had already closed. The Chinese were left shocked, as the protagonist rushed in, screaming for help with a monster horde following him. This left the Chinese confused, and so they urged the young man to get out of here as he rushed towards them. The team leader knew very well that the protagonist was luring the monster towards them intentionally, followed by the few monsters that would attract the others. And just as he urged his team to escape as fast as possible, An So-young came running with more gnolls. And here was the crucial part, as she then spotted the desired runner. Yet as the Chinese began to argue about their next course of action in panic, Wolverine suddenly passed through them, and charged at one of them, before slashing his weapon past him, and running away, with a speed that amazed Howren. And so he urged his team, who were panicking, to follow the fleeing protagonist. Suddenly, the Chinese team was caught up by the monsters, making them lose track of the hero. And just like that, the adventure found themselves surrounded by the dogs. Even so, Howren urged the German to fight until the end, screaming that they should forcibly carve their path to the exit. The couple then asked each other to stay alive. And with that being said, the mountain monster launched its attack, only for the team leader to charge at him, and hit him on the side with his blade, that he imbued with some sort of magic, that made the monster explode. Howren urged the German to put on a show of fight. All contestants tried to fight their way out, through the horde of gnolls. Meanwhile, our heroes waited patiently at the gate, and then quickly noticed that the Chinese couple had arrived earlier than expected. Howren affirmed that he would be merciless, yet our hero didn't care. A little earlier, the man found himself tired. Only 3 survivors who could reach the exit remained, but then they were spotted by other monsters, so the Chinese braced themselves as they were far outnumbered. Howren realized that the backup of the mountain creature was on the way. Even so, he was determined to make it out alive, in order to punish the one that brought the horde upon his team. A deep desire to take the life of the protagonist burned in the heart of this man. At the same time, the bald man was up against 2 monsters that he managed to take on. The lady was also holding her ground. By taking out the monsters, She then decided to check up on Chen, who affirmed that he was alright, only for the dog creature to sneak up behind him and leave the girl horrified, as he was suddenly bitten in the neck. But before she could avenge him, she was grabbed by the team leader, who affirmed that they needed to retreat at once. Renhwa agreed to follow him with tears in her eyes. And with that being said, the both of them made a quick escape. Shortly after, the remaining Chinese managed to shake off the monsters. Renhwa pointed out how the arm of the man was injured, yet Howren affirmed that it was nothing and that it would heal soon. When asked if they were the only ones who managed to make it out alive, the lady broke into remembering her bald friend, only for a gentle hand to be placed on her shoulder, affirming that they would mourn him later. Howren was full of rage as he stated that their current priority was to eliminate the hero. After walking for some time, the Chinese couple finally made it to the exit, only for the man to be left alerted. Upon spotting the protagonist, leaving him invaded by fury, Chow Mu Yuk just noticed them, claiming that they had arrived earlier than expected. Renhwa was also invaded by rage upon seeing the hero. Howren affirmed that he would be merciless, but the protagonist wouldn't care, claiming that the reaction was exaggerated for the situation, leaving the lady enraged, as she lashed out at him for being the cause of Chen's death. This led the young man to sigh, before taking up a dark expression and calling out the irony of accusing them of murder while they themselves were going to sacrifice their allies to climb up the ranks. But the team leader affirmed that Chen was special as he was their friend, which is why he was more determined than ever to avenge him by slaying the protagonist. Yet the young man who mocked him for considering his friend better than the others claimed that he would be the one spilling blood today. Renhwa then claimed that she would punish the protagonist with the most painful of deaths. An So-young pointed out that despite pitting the lady at first, she now realizes that she isn't worthy of mercy. With that being said, the two of them took their fighting stances, as the grieving one charged at the warrior, with a swing that she almost failed to evade. Renhwa began to scream at the marauder, who asked her to keep her mouth shut while fighting. The protagonist was amazed by the sword skills of his partner, claiming that he would have crushed him back on Earth. Howren then asked about his identity, seeing how he only took the Japanese team and the largest squad into consideration, so he angrily demanded our hero to present himself. Even so, Cha Mu-yuk failed to see the point of it before claiming that the swordsman who fell into his trap couldn't possibly defeat him and that he was longing for this encounter. Howren, who didn't deny the fact, affirmed that the strategy of the young man was bound to fail and that he was eager to explain the reason behind it. Just like that, goblin nails clashed with steel. The two men expressed how each of them was surprised by the strength of the other, only for the Japanese to push the Korean away with his sword before charging at him with a deadly slash that our hero evaded at the last second. The both of them then redirected their weapons in order to bombard each other with a marriage of attacks. Realizing that his opponent, despite being weakened, was still someone powerful who knew martial arts, Howren pointed out how the protagonist lacked mastery of his weapon that he got from the movies and only relied on his brute stats. But the young man was already familiar with the X-Men pun as he tried to step on his adversary, who firmly planted his foot into the ground before swinging his blade. The Chinese sword went right between the Korean claws, yet just before they could reach the hands, the protagonist twisted his fist in order to trap the sword and give himself a striking opportunity. With that, he launched his cross towards his opponent's face, only for the swordsman to duck the lethal head, leaving the core consumer shocked. Howren then kicked the protagonist in the face before trying to cut him down, but just then, he blocked the blade with his left arm and injured his opponent with the right one. With that being said, Howren firmly grasped his sword and unleashed a tempest of slashes that the young man barely managed to avoid. Seeing the tired one showcase this skill made the one who assumed himself to be the strongest of round 13 wonder about the power of the Chinese in peak condition. His opponent then turned his gaze to the fight of the ladies. Howren realized that Renhwa wasn't in desperate need of his help, and so he knocked the protagonist away, only for him to quickly stop his course using his claws. The swordsman proposed to end the duel quickly, and so they both agreed to use their strongest moves in order to end the fight. With that being said, the contestants raised themselves for the final clash. Howren, who analyzed his opponent, realized that he would try to enhance himself before charging against him. He also assumed that the type of hero was vulnerable to long-range attacks, and even if he evaded the long range, he would still be taken down in the short range that follows. Meanwhile, the Korean began to recall his master as he was uncertain of his victory, which is why he decided to put the odds in his favor. With that being said, he realized that he was left with only one option, and so each of them charged at the other for the final clash. Each of them also decided to use their trickery. Our hero dodged the long-range attack of his opponent by jumping into the air. Do you think the Chinese alerted as he prepared himself to throw the axe? Cha Mu-hyuk quickly acted, only for Howren to evade with no problems and call him out for the weakness of his so-called last move as they clashed blades once again. But just then, the man noticed what had truly happened. An So-young couldn't believe her eyes. Renhwa was also stunned as the axe hit her in the head, making her fall dead on the ground to her partner's horror. And just as Howren was in shock and disbelief, he looked down and found himself stabbed as his blood stained the wall. He wished for the protagonist to end up in hell before letting go of his sword and finally passing away. Cha Mu-yuk affirmed that he was already there as he was in the lowest point he could ever reach. While mark harvesting, the hero began to complain about muscle pain as the girl asked him if he was truly okay with her taking all of the marks. The protagonist affirmed, claiming that it was just a surprise attack and that their plan was a success thanks to her, with a cheerful smile only to be met by dark gazes. The lady then turned to the lifeless body and looked into her lifeless eyes, which plunged her into her own thoughts. With that being said, our heroes decided to resume their way, and decided to hurry as not much time was left. The girl knew very well that the boy only did the necessary to survive, which meant killing others like everyone else. She also acknowledged how brilliant his plan was regarding diversion and wiping out the enemy, and despite knowing all that, she was invaded by an ill feeling. A little earlier, when the Chinese were fighting our heroes, the bully was clashing blades with another team. He then decided to use his free hand to try and grab the face of his opponent, only for his hand to be quickly pushed away. The event then charged at him, and just like that, long sword clashed with katana. With the distance between the two of them, each man had now his back facing towards his team. Bae-yeogchul looked behind him, looking at his dead man while thinking of how they were easily found by the enemy. The Japanese took the two of them, who had great skill in a surprise attack, without giving them a chance to fight back. And as the bully began to think of how his team survived due to his efforts, one of his lackeys asked him if they would survive, only for the man in charge to lash out at him and call him useless. The bowl cut recognized the one with the katana as Shibata of Musashi and his allies as Aitu and Aoki, watching left hand terrified, only for his later to scream at him to keep himself together. Bae-yeogchul knew very well that he was in a tough situation, as according to the appearance of the Japanese team, they had easily dealt with every threat they had encountered. Shibata, who had no choice but to acknowledge the strength of the bully, claimed that he wanted to use the sense of smell of his ally in order to plan a surprise attack. And when asked about the next course of action, the swordsman explained how they should deal with the enemy quickly, but still be wary in order to evade the worst. Just then, someone screamed the Japanese name. Bae-yeogchul, who was open to the idea of fighting, claimed that he wanted to have a conversation first. So the man explained how he was already speaking and how he should go straight to the chase. So the bully pointed out his strength that would greatly damage the Japanese. But Shibata failed to understand what he meant, so the bully explained how he wanted to propose a team-up, which left the rest of his team shocked. This confused the Japanese. Bae-yeogchul proposed to resume their fight after taking care of the powerful Chinese team, as they were sure to be a problem. Shibata found logic in his opponent's words, and so he refused his offer. The bully was left shocked. The Japanese explained how he had heard stories about his opponent, who was sure to betray him in the end, which is why he wanted to keep on fighting. And so, the Korean took his stance, as he accepted to resume the battle with a man who surprised him with his craziness. The Japanese asked him to shut up. Bae-yeogchul decided to give instructions to his team, explaining how he would be fighting Shibata and Aitu and leave the rest of the Japanese to them, before affirming that he would personally eliminate anyone who defies him. And just like that, the two teams charged at each other. A butterfly pin was handed. The girl asked the boy about the time he got it. The protagonist affirmed that such items would not suit him, which convinced his partner, who accepted the gift with a small blush on her face. So Young was surprised to see something pretty on the continent that she decided to accept, despite the weak stats. Meanwhile, our hero was searching in his backpack. Cha Moo-hyu decided to check the many items that they had collected, despite the many more that they had wasted. He was now in possession of a skeleton and a leather belt that he should evaluate later on. But his most precious find was the inventory bag, as it was an expensive small container that can contain large objects, which made him realize that the Chinese team was wealthy. And by taking their kills for himself, he was now in possession of more than 3,000 kills and needed 2,500 more in order to appear on the scoreboard. Our hero then cracked a creepy smile upon thinking of how the tower tokens he earned amounted to 3 million points, only to be poked by his partner. The young man assumed that it had to do with his creepy smile, only for the girl to put on the hairpin, leaving him surprised. An So-young asked him if the butterfly suited her. Watching the amazed protagonist confirmed. After a small silence, the sunder hit our hero for staring too much, and as he complained that she ruined the mood with her anger, the lady was left baffled by his idiocy. With that being said, she decided to go to sleep, claiming to have been exhausted by this day, as the protagonist told her to do so instead of pushing him aside. Shortly after, under the rock, the girl was left to think as she played with her new accessory. Upon remembering the smile of the protagonist, the tsundere couldn't help but find him rather irritating. Meanwhile, the bully was annoyed by the fact that his team had been wiped out. He, who underestimated the Japanese, realized that he had survived by pure chance and that he was now powerless to fight back. Bae-yeogchul, who was exhausted, was now forced to find a way to evade the 24-hour penalty, so he decided to help himself with the medicine he had on him and keep a low profile while searching for the exit. The bully, we remembered our hero, decided to avoid monsters as much as possible. The man was greatly irritated by the fact that he was reduced to hiding, which is why he was more determined than ever to slay all other contestants and be the only survivor left. Meanwhile, on the third floor where the Japanese team was resting, the staff user claimed that she wanted revenge. The team leader affirmed that they needed to rest, but the one with long hair was still determined to get revenge. Shibata reminded our plan to occupy the stairs to the final floor on day 9 and slay anyone who dares to enter. Aoki explained that this would be an issue, as the Chinese team would certainly become a problem, as well as the bully, who they might not get the chance to eliminate. Aoki was pretty pissed off as the grand plan made them lose 3 of their allies in Bay to get out of dear friend's smell range, which is why he wanted to avenge his allies. The leader let out a small laugh before grabbing his subordinate by the collar and calling him out for his insolence. He explained that they might not find their targets if they start searching and that if Aoki wanted justice, he should go on his own, and since he was afraid to do so, he should stay silent. And so the staff user expressed her disappointment, claiming to be stronger than her team leader. Yet just as the situation was about to escalate further, the third one had no choice but to stop them, explaining that it was crucial for them to stick together. The smeller then turned to his friend and reassured him that he would notify him if the Korean man popped up, before affirming that they should all get along as they were the strongest team. With that being said, the staff caller freed herself and began to walk away, stating that they should find a good place to rest. Shibata called her out for her Yakuza-like attitude despite being a gym teacher on Earth, but the smaller affirmed that her sense of fraternity wants to be acknowledged, not judged. The team leader affirmed that he wanted the Korean dad as well. Time was passing as the set Korean did his best to keep a low profile and keep on the routine of finding the exit, waiting for the reset, and searching for the exit again. Despite the Japanese finding some leads on him, they were still unable to track him down, as there was no true way to locate any enemy, which is why everyone was on the brink of panicking. With that, day finally set. At the same time, our heroes found the stairs to be clear. An So-young angrily claimed that she would have loved going to another floor before the reset time if it wasn't for a lizard lover. Yet the protagonist didn't regret it, as all of his stats except magic had ranked up. This left him very satisfied and surprisingly sad that they only had 2 days left and this XP mine. When suddenly, just as day 9 arrived, the ground began to tremble. A hole suddenly appeared under our hero's feet, which led to a long fall. The protagonist began to curse the enforcer, who must have kept yet another rule as a secret from them. Meanwhile, in the dark abyss where Karo was residing and peacefully listening to music, he suddenly noticed something, and that his prank would soon come to an end, as the forced hunt was almost over, so he decided to check the number of survivors. The enforcer realized that there were many fewer survivors than predicted, meaning that the teams must have fought each other quite a lot. He then decided to check the watches and discovered that the Japanese leader had 10 and the hero had 11, meaning that they took all the watches of their teams. The demon was also pleasantly surprised with the results of the protagonist, seeing how he had acquired more watches than his bully, and so I decided to increase the number of deaths by making the contestants kill each other, to the point where there is nothing left, which made him let out a malefic laugh. Back to our fallen heroes. They were shocked to see that despite the pain, they didn't take much damage from what seemed to be a lethal fall. As the protagonist pointed out how they had returned to level 1, the girl was left angry as day 10 still hadn't arrived. And just as he began to think of how this was the doing of the tricky enforcer, they were suddenly approached by none other than the bully. The Koreans were surprised to meet each other. The confused Bae Yochul affirmed that he was happy to see his lucky one again, only for the supposed lucky to claim that the feeling wasn't mutual. Just then, the metallic staff touched the ground, as its angry wielder finally arrived. Aoki finally laid eyes on the murderer, and so she decided to immediately take revenge for her teammates, only for her 2 friends to quickly stop her. This scene made our hero realize that some bad blood must exist between the bully and the Japanese. Bae Yochul realized that the fact that they had all fallen to the first floor was the doing of the enforcer. While the Japanese team neither tried to calm down his subordinate, the bully, having realized that the lady was angry at the death of her comrades who attacked him, claimed that he was the real victim, as his entire team was wiped out. Aoki asked for the reason she was still being held down, so the leader claimed that she should read the room, as the presence of our 2 heroes, who might be allies of the bully or of the absent Chinese team, could make things tricky, meaning that the battle move would be to abstain themselves for now until they are certain of the power of these 2. Shibata assured her that she would eventually get her revenge. The bully failed to grasp the reason behind all of this drama, seeing how the Japanese team was recently put up while the hero was trying to convince his partner to go with his plan. The lady who disliked the situation realized that it was their only option. With that being said, the one with the innocent smile decided to share an idea, leaving all others intrigued. Bae Yochul affirmed that this was no place for our hero's suggestion, only for the protagonist to ignore him and propose a big team-up. But just as the bully affirmed that this would be impossible, he was suddenly interrupted by the Japanese team leader, who asked the protagonist to elaborate, as there was clearly bad blood between them and Bae Yochul, which made them enemies. Aoki tried to interfere, claiming that she would never team up with the one who murdered her comrades, earning her the death stare of Shibata, who demanded her to stay silent. With that, the lady got her mouth shut. When asked if he could resume, Shibata affirmed. The hero, who claimed that the return to the first floor was the doing of the demon, pointed out their few numbers and that each of them were the sole survivors of their teams. The Japanese team leader confirmed that they were reduced to 3 and that the once largest team only had 1 survivor. This angered the bully, who proposed to have the final fight with the Japanese right now, only for the protagonist to affirm that the Chinese team still had its 7 members left, claiming to have spotted them on level 2 just recently with no members missing and that they must be somewhere else on the first floor. The young man then claimed that the demon wanted to unite the small teams for the final fight. The protagonist then explained that they would have a much harder time surviving if they killed each other right now. Bae Yochul expressed his doubt, so our hero claimed to have no proof of what he was saying but stated that a team-up was better than nothing. Cha Muyuk explained that it would be for the best to have many allies, seeing how the demon must still have some more surprises for them. This left the bully to think, as well as the Japanese team leader, who accepted to team up to his subordinate's surprise. They tried to convince him that working with Bae Yochul was a bad idea, only for him to claim that this was for the best, as they needed number advantage. Shibata also added that the words of the enforcer were empty and that they would have a hard time dealing with the Chinese team with unknown whereabouts. He then turned to the bully, explaining that he wouldn't pressure him for the team-up but claimed that it would be for his own best. Bae Yochul affirmed that he heard him loud and clear. Before accepting the offer, he also explained that the team-up would be temporary as he didn't trust any of them and that he would break the team if he found it not necessary. The Japanese team leader agreed to these conditions. As the team was formed, the girl began to think of how amazing her partner was for quickly coming up with a plan and making enemies work with each other. But now came the tricky part, as this alliance was certain to not last, seeing how it was built on a lie, meaning that once it is dissolved, the true winners would be revealed. Shibata then pointed at someone, claiming that he would walk in front. The boy affirmed that 2 things were irritating him. The first was receiving orders, and the second wanted to be put up front. But Shibata explained that he only asked for this due to his skills. Yet the bully didn't want to do it due to the vengeful lady that would stand behind him, but her leader affirmed that she would be harmless. Shibata then explained that it was only natural for him to give orders as his team was the biggest of the entire alliance. With that being said, he decided to initiate a vote regarding whether Bae Yochul should take the front, and with 5 hands being raised, it was decided. The bully was particularly pissed off at the protagonist, who also raised his hand. This left him greatly angered at the hero, who he decided to take revenge on before stating that they would take turns at the front. He then turned to the warrior, who was confused by this sudden gaze. An So-young despised Bae Yugchul to the point where she began to pray for him to get slain on the way. The Japanese team leader then asked our heroes to walk behind them, which they agreed to do. Cha Moo-hyuk, first a little bit insulted as Shibata had enough confidence to ask them to watch their backs while his teammates realized how worry-free he seemed. Back then, when he proposed the team, she was left shocked, so he explained how it was better than a hazardous brawl. Our hero explained that they should use the Chinese team as a protection for the team-up, yet the lady still had her doubts. She was then left baffled upon seeing him crack an innocent smile as he claimed to have a strategy to betray them all in the end. Even now, the girls still had some doubts regarding the plan. Aoki asked her leader if he had a plan, only for him to be intrigued. The former gym teacher affirmed that she didn't trust the two in the back and the one at the front, so the man asked her to keep her voice down in order to avoid confrontations. He then cracked a malevolent smile as he explained that everything would work out just fine. Meanwhile, the bully was annoyed by the fact that the team-up was his only option. He was also intrigued by the redhead, who seemed to have some shady knowledge. Even so, he decided to drop the matter. With that being said, all of them decided to wait for the perfect opportunity to commit betrayal. After 4 hours of roaming and finding the stairs, the hero pointed out how they were faster than expected as Shibata explained how only normal dwarves were residing on this floor. With that being said, the word decided to bid them farewell, as he rushed to the stairs while ditching his team, leaving everybody baffled. An So-young expressed how stupid it was for the Black Dragons to support such an idiot, so the hero explained how he must have a hidden quality. With that being said, the staff holder was the second. Shibata was shocked to see that these two had survived this long, so the lady affirmed that she didn't want the subject of her events to disappear once again. The leader explained that the bully was powerless alone, which is why they should just go to the upper floor. Shortly after, on level 2, Bae Yugchul was sitting like a good little boy, which confirmed the theory of the Japanese man. The bully pointed out that he was surprised by the map changing, so the staff user explained how they were aware of this since floor 1. She then explained that returning them all to the first floor was the only thing that gave the map shift a meaning before calling out the bully for wanting to initiate a sneak attack. And as he expressed how irritated he was by the enforcer, the Japanese team leader asked him to keep calm as they needed to find 4 more staircases in less than 20 hours. The angered one asked the man to stay away, threatening to kill him, yet Shibata remained at ease. Our heroes realized that they were on the clock and what an end a top situation as they needed to find the final staircase as well. The Japanese man urged the Korean to move. The bully tried his best to contain his anger, while thinking of how the chance to kill the irritating one would present itself. The Japanese warned their leader that they should be more worried about the hero in the back than the brute up front, as they couldn't help but feel like pawns in his master plan. Shibata raised both of them for thinking correctly, yet asked them to pay him no mind as they were the strongest in an alliance that everyone was keeping up until floor 5. He was also certain that they could eliminate their teammates without fail when the right chance came. Shortly after, Bae Yugchul, who was disgusted by the undead, used his skill to fend his way through them. As he threw explosions left and right, the Japanese acknowledged his ability to carve a path, as their leader pointed out how it was only natural from someone cherished by the Black Dragons. While our heroes found his style foolish, they wished for his death. A couple of explosions later, the next exit had been located. Shibata praised the bully as he had allowed them to reach the staircase in 3 hours, leaving him angered while claiming that he had carried the entire team. But the hero affirmed that it wasn't the case, as they killed and extracted some tokens from the zombies themselves, which only angered him more as they were pressed for time. Cha Moo-hyuk then explained to the annoyed one how the loot had been distributed fairly. Our protagonist realized that since the map got less complex, he would be able to find his favorite monster on the 3rd floor. With that being said, he proposed to take the front with his partner in place of the bully. But Bae Yugchul affirmed that this would be impossible, as they couldn't possibly hold their own in front of the lizard soldiers, so the hunter asked him to have a little faith. Our hero claimed that he wanted to earn some tokens. Even so, the rest of the team had their doubts regarding their ability to hold their own, leaving our heroes no choice but to charge in order to prove them wrong, which the others found to be a lethal foolery. An So-young asked him if they truly had to demonstrate their power, to which the hero confirmed, stating that they should hold back a little. And with that being said, the two partners began to tear their way through the ramen soldiers, leaving the bully shocked and confirming the doubts of the Japanese. And with one final swing, the axe of the protagonist drew its last blood, representing this fight as they approved of their strength. And while Shibata agreed to give them the lead, Bae Yugchul was left stunned by the young man's sudden surge of power. As the core was consumed, the others were left intrigued, so the hero explained how he was just having a snack break. This left the swordsman disgusted as the protagonist was feeding on the hearts of the monsters. An So-young claimed that he should keep his diet a secret despite gaining power, only for our hero to affirm that it was part of his plan. He explained how it would be better to be perceived as unpredictable and that leaving the others confused would allow them to lay better plans. The protagonist cheerfully tossed the man some lizard meat. The smaller claimed that it was possible for the hero to have an eating skill, only for the chief to claim that it would be impossible to acquire for a newbie, so they should let him be. With that being said, the staff user called him out for putting the bully in their backs, so he explained how he was harmless at the moment. The protagonist then decided to resume the way while the Japanese man was left intrigued by his actions. Meanwhile, the bully watched it all, more determined than ever to keep himself alive. As Cha Moo-hyuk explained that they cleared the floor in 4 hours, the Japanese man explained how they would have been quicker if it wasn't for his quick snack break. Our hero claimed that he was too hungry, yet in reality, he had no use for cores anymore. Since all of his stats were now rank 6, he would need cores of the same rank to make them evolve. Thus, the cores of the lizard men of rank 7 were now useless. Even so, the remaining survivors were still pretty strong. which is why he decided to lower them to his level. Cha Mu-yuk planned on playing with their minds and instigating them, to the point where he could slay all of them in order to become number one. His partner watched in silence as he cracked yet another evil smile. Once on the 4th floor, Shibata decided to discuss some details, as the untrustworthy enforcer claimed that the antonyms of the last floor would appear on the last day, meaning that they might still not have appeared yet. And so he proposed the team scatter for the search while still being wary of the Chinese team, who was nowhere to be seen. With that being said, all began to search for the final staircase. Our heroes went to search together, as well as the Japanese, while the bully roamed alone. After 7 hours of searching, the staircase was still nowhere to be seen. This made them wonder if they should keep searching. Shibata turned to Itu, asking him if there was still any unexplored area, but the man affirmed that they had roamed the entire floor, and when asked if he had some kind of mapping skill, the smeller explained how he had a good nose. The alerted hero asked him if he could also smell individuals, which he confirmed, leaving the protagonist at ease, and the bully with an idea of what was truly happening. Shibata proposed to take a break, claiming that farming gnolls would be a pain, before proposing that each group of 2 would take turns watching, with the first being him and the hero. Soyeon tried to argue that taking a break now might waste their precious time, yet the man affirmed that his ally's nose was immaculate, meaning that the best thing to do was wait. And while she still had her doubts, the bully affirmed that he was tired, before screaming at her to sit down just like she was instructed. Aoki immediately called him out for his rude manners, urging him to watch his mouth. And so Bae Yuchul accepted to keep silent. This irritated the staff user, who was taught by his mother that he would pair up with the bully, while she and the one who presented herself as An So-young would keep watch together. But when Aoki asked for the reason behind this judgment, her friend asked her to keep quiet. Bae Yuchul explained that he was doing so in order to make each Japanese watch an enemy. He then began to think about the name of the warrior, before finally recalling where he heard it from. The bully recognized her as a member of Sixth Pool and someone who was close to Kim Jong-won. The small one recognized the last name as the branch manager of the family in question. Bae Yuchul explained how this was a famous Korean who almost got castrated after trying to mess with An So-young. And as he kept on blabbering about her story, a blade was suddenly swung, only for the blade to clash with steel instead of penetrating flesh. The bully realized that he had almost gone down as he claimed that he was only telling a story. An So-young asked him to shut up with darkness in her eyes and threatening to open the man's throat, only for him to claim that this would be a change of pace from the sausage fest that was this tower. Aoki tried to intervene, only to be stopped. The lady heard that the Koreans were also enemies of the body, claiming that she would assist in his murder, only for the smaller one to claim that this might be a trap. Itu began to recall his recent conversation with the leader about the possibility of Howren having survived. This matter explained that it wasn't likely, seeing how they hadn't seen him yet, making Shibata point out how the heroes must have eliminated him. This was surprising as it meant that they killed the Chinese team, so the leader explained that it was the reason behind their laid-back lie and how they might be allies of the bully. And so the swordsman decided to converse with the protagonist in order to see whether the Koreans were united or not before taking any action. He also instructed this matter to keep their teammate in check. Itu, who assumed that they might be overreacting, decided to take the risk and see the result of the fight between the 2 Koreans. Seeing this, our hero tried to intervene, only for a blade to be swung near his neck in order to stop him. Shibata was standing in the protagonist's way. The hero angrily asked him to stand aside as the man tried to calm him down. Cha Mu-yuk urged him once again to stay out of his way, yet the Japanese didn't move. The protagonist realized that the man had some idea about the outcome, which he didn't deny. Cha Mu-yuk explained that he would immediately intervene in case the girl was in danger and even slay the swordsman if he tried to stop him, which the men accepted. Meanwhile, as the 2 of them flashed blades, the bully pointed out to the girl the stares of the others, yet she explained how they all wanted him dead, and so he screamed at her in a whisper, asking her to think about who would be the next target once he's dead. After a small whisper in her ear, the lady was that frustrated, before knocking her opponent away from her. Bae Yuchul, who couldn't help but admire the great power of his opponent, decided to end the fight and rest as much as possible. With that being said, he decided to shut his eye a little as the girl he called his whispers regarding a deadly ambush. She had no choice but to feel annoyed as she heard him state that it would be 3 versus a team of 3, which is why they should join forces. Bae Yuchul also stated that he would be launching the first strike before asking the girl to convince her partner. The bully then explained that once the Japanese, who would surely try to stab them in the back, were gone, the 2 of them would have the number advantage against him. He also claimed that this team-up was bound to be broken after a few hours. An So-young began to wish for their strategy to work well. At the same time, the leader of the Japanese affirmed to the boy once again that there was nothing to fear. He then pointed out the reaction of the young man, who must be really attached to his partner. Our hero tried to deny the allegations, claiming that they needed to stick together in the face of the Chinese, only for Shibata to crack an evil smile and affirm that the boy was lying regarding Howren and his team still being alive. A chill ran down the young one's spine upon seeing that he had been discovered. The hero tried to insist, claiming that the Chinese were still a threat, only for the man to ask him to stop with the lies. And so the man began to state every detail of the young man's plan that was ruined upon realizing that the Japanese were, in fact, smart and tricky. He also pointed out the hateful look that the hero gave the bully, meaning that they were definitely enemies. The protagonist tried to deny everything, claiming that they weren't inside some comic, only for Shibata to reveal that he knew this much due to him being a true Yakuza and a killer who wants to team up with other murderers, leaving the young man baffled. With that being said, the Yakuza proposed that the axe user and his partner team up with them against their common enemy and that they would help them when sneak attacking. Cha Mu-hyuk, who realized that they were being used to lure the bully, asked what would happen if they didn't accept. Shibata affirmed that they were in no position to refuse, affirming that if they did so, his teammates would take care of the young boy's partner while he, who proclaimed to be powerful, dealt with him. With that being said, the young man was presented with a choice between the Yakuza's protection or siding with the bully. Meanwhile, Bei Yuchul, who was unable to sleep, realized that he was in a tough situation. He noticed that the Chinese team might have been wiped out and suspected the Japanese. The man, who was comforted by his hidden wild card, realized that the Japanese leader would stab him in the back at the nearest opportunity. Shortly after, the shift of the protagonist and the Yakuza came to an end. Shibata explained how he needed to speak with his subordinate, before stating that the hero and his partner might also want to talk a little. Later on, the two of them explained to each other how they were invited by both sides. Cha Muyuk explained how the Japanese who demanded an alliance were aware that the Chinese had been wiped out due to some sort of skill. Even so, the lady wasn't surprised, and the idea she had was also the same that the third partner came up with. The hero explained that he had predicted that the two enemy sides would try to fight each other. He then stated that for the plan to work, one needed a one-hit skill like the thrust of the warrior. With that being said, the protagonist affirmed that he had all faith in her and her abilities. The angered tsundere began to panic as she urged the boy to let her go. Our hero was worried about her due to her red face, so she asked him to pay it no mind. With that being said, she apologized for bursting out as such at the bully, claiming that it won't happen again. Yet to her shock, the hero didn't scold her and affirmed that he had the same reaction as well. With that being said, their small meeting came to an end. An So-young was baffled as he began to walk away. Our protagonist, who realized that he must maintain his composure, decided to rely on his own power, seeing how his skill was useless as his rank 6 stats had no points in them. And so he decided to have faith in the nails given to him by his good friend, the goblin. Everyone realized that the final clash would occur at the time of the last shift, when the most hated character of all would be inside the straight passage. The bully cracked up an evil smile, as he had it all figured out. Shortly after, when the lady took their shift, the marauder explained how they had spent 1 hour and 30 minutes into it. Back then, she decided to ask the protagonist a question regarding his irrational move back then to save the body from the zombies. So he explained how he did it for the sake of the watches, making her lash out at him as it wasn't what she meant. Cha Muyuk explained that he had 3 motives, with the first being that Bei Yuchul would have certainly survived the zombie, meaning that playing for his death would be useless. And second, it would be easier to kill him and take his loot. The third reason was something that the hero was ashamed to admit, as he wanted to end the life of the bully, who reminded him of his bad past by his own hands. The protagonist was certain that the only way for him to look into tomorrow was to kill the ghost of the past. At first, the young man didn't mind dying. Only now he found himself obsessed with the ranking, and so he apologized for all the problems he caused his partner. Back to the present, the lady prepared her weapon, hoping for the best. She then looked at the staff user, knowing full well that she had to end her with a single strike. In order for the plan to work, each side must consider the hero's allies, as the sneak attack would occur once the bully is positioned at the middle of the battlefield. Without the Japanese leader, he would try to betray the most hated one here. While Bei Yuchul was certainly trying to target a single individual on the Japanese team, the first phase of the plan would be to pretend to be allied with the bullies, meaning that the lady would have to kill the staff user, as no newbie could parry her thrust. And seeing how her partner was tasked by the Yakuza to kill the bully, it means that no one would be around when the protagonist ambushed this matter. This should result in our heroes uniting in a 3-way battle against the 2 other survivors. The worst of cases could join forces. An So-young realized that taking the first blood was crucial, as well as dominating the exit in order to retreat if needed. Just then, someone woke up the bully, who asked if it was now morning. Cha Muyuk affirmed that it was high noon. Bei Yuchul explained that he found the protagonist funny, which was his only redeemable quality. With that being said, the delayed bully went to proceed with his shift. And so, the Yakuza crashed his weapon, standing ready. Our hero did the same, as he firmly grabbed his axe. Bei Yuchul tried to converse with Itu, who was having none of it. Meanwhile, the ladies noticed that the disgusting one was drawing near. Bei Yuchul then expressed how curious he was about the smeller's loot, leaving him totally full of rage. The boy affirmed that he was just trying to initiate conversation. And with that being said, he took a menacing tone, claiming that he was about to show what he got from the last 4 stunts. With that, it began. An So-young charged at Aoki, who to her shock stood ready for her attack. The protagonist realized that something felt odd, and so the Yakuza drew out his weapon. The staff user, noticing the ambush, was trying to offer knowledge about their plan, as expected. Even so, our hero was confident in the abilities of his partner, who left the staff user amazed, seeing how she evaded her ambush. The marauder explained that it was too predictable. Our hero knew very well that his partner was powerful. She stabbed her opponent in the heart. Just like that, Aoki fell at the hands of An So-young, leaving the Yakuza horrified, as well as the third team member. The bully decided to use this window for some reason, invading the young one's heart, and so he threw his axe, thinking of how he began to expect the worst. Regardless of the upcoming surprise, a dark feeling of fear. The weapon was thrown in Bei Yuchul's direction. At the second, the girl pulled out her blade from the most recent victim. A bright red light suddenly appeared in the tunnel. Cha Muyuk felt as if he couldn't keep his partner out of trouble as he promised, as well as sensing an incoming despair. An So-young always thought that she had to be strong while alone. This had always been her philosophy ever since childhood, which was greatly influenced by herself and her mother as well. So-young, who lost her father, was raised by her single mother, who decided to teach her about the cruelty of the world, claiming that it was a hard place filled with evil individuals and where one could only rely on himself. And despite her mother being a bad parent, the girl managed to make her proud. At some point, winning became natural to her, as she felt that none could rival her. Due to the world she lived in, An So-young never knew friendship. She never tried to befriend anyone, despite always treating them with respect. This cold world never allowed her to escape her solitude. She also met some walls on her way, like the massive waves of people disappearing back on Earth. According to her, her home was just like this continent, with the only difference being that winning means seeing tomorrow. Eventually, she got herself into Sixth Pool, which made her feel reassured, thinking that she had finally found allies. The lady believed that she would be safe with a powerful group, to the point where she even began planning to rise through its ranks, only to regret later on calling those people allies. For the first time ever, An So-young was frightened, thinking about the fact that she couldn't survive or fight back on her own. An So-young found herself ashamed on this continent and assumed she would be punished for asking for help, so she continued to run from this tragic day. She believed that solitude was her only way to survival, yet her mind was suddenly changed. The bright red light was so powerful that it blinded the girl, and also reached our hero, who was also blinded as well. He recognized this as the flash grenade, a rare skill that allowed the user to paralyze his target for 10 seconds if they were of the same level. The fact that the bully possessed this one-time skill was a shock to everyone. Just then, Bae Yujul grabbed the flying axe. This matter found him unable to move. He tried his best to resist in order to defend himself, unable to understand what was happening, only to be then decapitated by someone with a wide, atrocious smile. With a Tao out of the equation, Bae Yujul charged at the girl who couldn't move. The look he had on his face reminded her of her encounter with the branch manager. That left her with a sense of despair. Even so, she was ready to accept death, thinking of how she never relied on anyone. When suddenly, the hero arrived out of nowhere and kicked the bully in the back of his head, as great rage and fury filled his eyes. He then firmly planted the face of the brute in the ground. The hateful look he had on his face stunned his partner. The remaining Japanese were left amazed. As the protagonist moved before the stun effect was over, Cha Mu-yuk angrily asked Bae Yugshul what he was trying to pull, threatening to stab him. Only then did he realize that the bully was charging up a skill to make him move away, and so he grabbed his partner in order to evade and ensure her safety. He then quickly checked up on her as she claimed to be unharmed. Bae Yugshul, who was in a lot of pain, decided to ask the hero a question regarding the trick he used to escape his flash grenade that shouldn't be blockable by normal defenses. Yet our hero wanted an answer to his question first, but just then, he decided to pull out his claws as he decided to drop the matter. Cha Mu-hyuk decided to put an end to Bae Yugshul once and for all. The bully, who was still curious about the way the flash grenade was escaped, called out our hero for trying to act tough with his claws like a certain movie character. He then turned to the Yakuza, claiming that he couldn't stand him anymore and threatened to kill him first if he dared to approach. Shibata dared the bully to apply his threats, as they were now both in a difficult situation. Bae Yugshul mocked him for his incidents despite having lost his teammates. With that being said, he claimed that tricks were now useless, before stating that he was now more reassured as things became truthful. With that being said, Bae Yugshul declared the beginning of the death match. With the three-way on the brink of commencing, our heroes prepared their weapons, while the bully charged up his skills, as the Yakuza concentrated his power into his blade, and with tension now at its peak. Our heroes were the first to charge up ahead. The protagonist immediately went for the ghost of the past. The lady found herself in a tough situation, as she was now face to face with the Yaku, ZA, that she decided to take on alone. Just after the first clash of steel, the lady repositioned herself, and began to deal blows with such speed and precision that it amazed her opponent. Seeing how he was overpowered, the man was left annoyed, and decided to resort to his own skills, in order to push her away, as she claimed that he wasn't as strong as he seemed. The man was left annoyed, seeing how he was being underestimated. With that being said, the both of them regained their guards. Meanwhile, as the bully crashed with the bullied, Bae Yugshul, who was amazed by the strength of his opponent, asked him how he had evaded the flash grenade, which the young one refused to reveal. This made him realize that his opponent was angry at the fact that his partner was attacked, meaning that they had a special relationship. The bully then pointed out how the young one had gotten stronger, as well as leveling up his game when it came to girls. With that being said, he charged his skill, and tried to attack our hero, who evaded. With that being said, game time to counterattack. As the boy found himself being bombarded with blows, he realized that his opponent was strong and should be taken seriously. And so, after thinking for a while, he got an idea as he filled up his sword with magic, leaving the hero alerted as he went for a slash down, that the protagonist was blocking with great difficulty. Bae Yugshul claimed that the protagonist was just like his other lackeys, who immediately showed incidents once they gained a little power. H.E. then kicked the hero in the gut, pushing him away. The two of them clashed once again as the brute explained that he was about to give the hero a lecture about respect, and so he unleashed blow after blow, urging the protagonist to respond. Regarding the method he used to evade his skill. With that being said, our hero decided to reveal everything, as he broke free from the clashes, stunning his opponent. Cha Mu-yuk explained that it was due to his superior rank that he was able to evade the flash grenade, making the bully realize that his opponent was now a rank 6, a fact that he simply couldn't accept. He was also overwhelmed with a mysterious emotion that made him feel that every blow of the claw could result in his death. Just then, our hero landed the strike, making his opponent bleed and leaving him amazed as he managed to injure him despite his strengthening skill. Bae Yugshul was left baffled, yet decided to concentrate on the battle as the next hit could be lethal, and so he decided to use his exclusive skill that allowed him to seal the points of his enemy's stats for a small period. With that being said, the bully affirmed that it doesn't matter how powerful the protagonist was, as he would now be taking control of his power. Yeah, just as the skill reached its target, it suddenly disappeared. The caster couldn't believe his eyes. Cha Mu-yuk explained how he had predicted this outcome, before stabbing his opponent in the chest, and upon seeing how confused he was, he explained how all of his stats had no points left for him to steal, seeing how they had all ranked up. Back to the confrontation between Shibata and An So-young. The Yakuza imbued power into his blade, before unleashing a powerful strike that his target evaded at the last second. Seeing how fast his opponent was made, the man assumed that she had invested a lot in her speed stat. The lady then played her opponent for his power that could finish her in one blow, claiming that it was too much for a newbie. So he explained how he was being sponsored. The man that he called his time on Earth, claiming that he was making everything with his blade mastery. The lady realized now she knew this was an attack skill, and so her opponent cracked a smile, before creating a copy of himself, leaving her baffled. The Yakuza was certain that she wouldn't be able to dodge this attack. As both copies charged at her at once, the girl realized that she was in a difficult situation as she evaded the first blade, only to be hit by the second. The man began to smile upon injuring her shoulder. Shibata stated that it was his skill, the art of an assassin, that was rather effective against speedy opponents. He then explained that speed was important but not invincible. The Yakuza then explained that he would kill her, followed by her partner, in order to become the #1. An So-young looked back and saw her partner fighting with all of his might, so she clenched her teeth and asked her opponent to grow up, claiming that he wasn't the victor just because he managed to land a single strike on her and that she had a promise to respect. This sudden determination confused the man, who had no choice but to praise her for her toughness. An So-young proposed to finish it all in the next attack as they were on the clock, which the man agreed with, claiming that he would show her the ultimate sword skill. With that being said, both swordsmen prepared themselves for the final crash. And when the time came, the criminal charged at the lady using the same skill as before. Yet just as he assumed that he had already won, the girl cracked a smile and moved at a stunning speed, leaving behind her an afterimage. Both copies were left intrigued, assuming that she had used a heading skill to disappear. The man was surprised by the girl's joker, who was left in a tough spot as his skill had reached its end, only for his opponent to appear right above him, claiming that she wasn't hiding in the first place. An began to think of how in this world points are the key to progress. Proficiency was crucial. And so, as she jumped from the ceiling, she stated to herself how the urgent thing to do was to make penetration evolve for the sake of using it twice in a row. Just then, the man noticed her proposing herself from above, so he tried to take a defensive stance. But it was too late. Both were now covered in blood as the man commented on how her move was defective. Yet in the end, he was the lifeless corpse, and she was the victor. Just then, the girl remembered her partner and urged herself to go assist him, only to be left shocked, as his fight had ended with his victory. Upon laying eyes upon her, the hero cracked his warm smile and praised her for winning. The girl, who was left shocked, began to cry tears of happiness, grieved by the fact that she wasn't going to be alone anymore. Having met someone special in this hellish place, someone unique that she never knew, someone similar to him before. But things weren't over, as the rings of the bully began to shine. Meanwhile, An So-young was feeling true happiness for the first time. The two victors rushed to each other. An So-young was stunned to see that she found such an energetic smile in the middle of hell. This made her remember that she too was entitled to happiness. Yet due to this illuminating smile, she saw something horrifying. And just then, the rings of the bully were activated, making him disappear. She realized that the pretty smile that she cherished so much was now being approached by evil and malevolence. Upon seeing him reappear, she realized that it was now too late to warn her partner. Thus, she was left with one choice. With that being said, she gathered all of her courage, grasped her blade, and launched herself forward. The hero was left confused, as it seemed that his partner was trying to kill him. At first, he couldn't process the information, yet upon seeing her bypass him, he turned around. The hero couldn't believe his eyes. The sight of blood left him horrified. Bae Yugchul and An So-young had stabbed each other. The bully was left confused, as he had completely. But the girl affirmed that he could never erase or hide the evil aura that he was emitting. This greatly frustrated the man, who tried to go for the final blow, only to be stabbed in the face by the claws of the protagonist. Bae Yugchul had finally and truly met his end. But unfortunately, the great warrior also fell to the ground, leaving her partner to hold her in his hands. Seeing her bleeding so much, Cha Mu-yuk desperately decided to resort to the medicine he had, only to be stopped by the lady, who affirmed to him that she couldn't be saved anymore. And since her doom was inevitable, she asked him to stay with her just a little longer. The protagonist broke down in tears, claiming that this would have never happened if he had properly killed his opponent. But the fact that the bully got back up was something that no one could have expected. So-min claimed that she didn't blame him as he allowed her to repay the favor. But the crying hero affirmed that there was nothing to pay back and that he only did what was normal. The lady revealed that this wasn't what she was talking about, as saving a life wasn't something out of the ordinary. Cha Mu-yuk was left confused, so she explained how she had a hard time making friends. But then she came to this world where she had to only rely on herself, which is why she doesn't regret sacrificing herself for him. So-young then thanked the protagonist, who leaned closer for the first and final kiss. She then recalled the time she revealed to him how she wanted to stick with her valors forever. But seeing how she failed to do so, she backed the hero to fulfill this dream for her sake. And with that being said, she finally let it go, and bid him farewell with a smile one last time, leaving Cha Mu-hyuk broken and in tears. Shortly after, in the dark abyss, the enforcer was peacefully drinking tea, when he was approached by none other than the winner himself, whom he greeted with a smile. The protagonist didn't speak a word in response, as his eyes were dead. The demons then pointed out that the contestant must be exhausted, which is why he invited him to sit. It then explained how it hadn't witnessed such a spectacular final in a long time. This made the hero realize that the entire match had been watched by the enforcer, who was particularly pleased with him and his late partner kissing. The demon then began to explain that he had skipped the watering parts and went straight to day 8. This earned him the protagonist to stand up and place his claws near his face. Despite his smile, anger came out of the demon's eyes. Cha Mu-hyuk furiously ordered him to shut his mouth as they were not here for his amusement. He asked the hero if he had taken any watches, particularly the one of his late partner, yet he was unable to respond. The enforcer knew that he had offended the protagonist, who, according to him, no matter what he collected and acted tough, was still not convincing. He said those words with a malefic smile. The creature that accused the young man of acting like one of those sad heroes from the shows was going to repent for taking the stuff of his late partner. Our hero didn't like to deny the accusation, yet he claimed that due to the system that the demons had created that allowed them to loot corpses, it was the only thing for him to do, to take a piece of the dead with him. The protagonist then asked the demon to not pretend as if he knows about humans, seeing how he had driven them to the edge without giving them a clear explanation of the rules, claiming that this made the demon unconvincing as well. With that, the creature left as it wasn't able to deny the argument of the human. The enforcer decided to forgive the young man for his insolence as he managed to argue despite being mentally tired. Yet out here, he didn't respond. With that being said, the demon decided to grant the victor his grand prize by touching his mark. The appearance of a sudden chest confused the hero, so Kero claimed that he would take his time explaining, starting off with the ranking. With that being said, he snapped his fingers. The demon then explained that more monsters were killed in round 13 than many others, which he didn't expect. With that being said, he touched the watch of the hero, asking him to take a look at it. This left the young man baffled, as he had a more than 12,000 kill count that earned him first place. The demon affirmed that there was no need to hide his joy, before explaining how he would be rewarded with 1,000,000 points and 10 kilos of bones of the prime dragon, which left our hero baffled. Kero explained how these bones are the only remains of a dragon, yet they were still bones at the end of the day before presenting the hero with his second prize, the chest. The entity then explained that it had already taken care of all the formalities regarding the random box that the hero just needed to open. This confused the young man, so the demon explained how this was a reward only given to the first rank. Kero explained how he only needed to place his hand on it and stay open, and that even he doesn't know what the chest contains. Our hero feared this to be a trap, yet the demon affirmed that the pranks are over and that the random box was given to him by his superiors. With that being said, the protagonist uttered the word, open, activating the magic seal on the box, and finally opening it, only to reveal a questionable item. This left the protagonist confused. But upon taking a good look, the enforcer was left horrified upon realizing that this was the extremely rare item known as evil feeling. Our hero asked for an explanation, but the demon was too preoccupied trying to understand his superiors who had given such an item to simple humans while he asked for instructions. Kuro instructed the young man to raise his hands and demand the world to be awakened while still being confused. The hero failed to grasp the utility of these instructions, urgent to just do what he says. According to the enforcer, this is an item with a will of its own that demons absorb in order to change their souls. But in the hands of humans, it will just awaken the demon's will. The confused protagonist asked what would happen upon awakening, so the demon explained how he would find out upon applying his instructions. After giving it some thought, the hero tried to wake the will, but was surprised to see that nothing was happening. The demon asked him to keep going, and so he kept on trying to wake the evil feeling up. The marble then began to react. After some time, the protagonist began to feel something fuzzy in his hands. A cute little creature had appeared. Our hero was left confused while the demon, who approached him, was surprised by the shape of his feelings. The creature, who suddenly popped up, startling the protagonist, explained how it was its first time seeing the evil feeling awakened, as it is normally just absorbed. Cha Moo-hyuk was surprised to see the demon not trying to steal the precious item from him, so he explained how he wasn't allowed to touch the prize of the winner. Kero explained how the furball that he had to name would obey the will of the protagonist and that he would have to discover its hidden purposes that even he ignored. With the awards ceremony being over, the enforcer pledged the winner to get out. When asked if naming the creature was mandatory, the annoyed demon explained that it would help connect the spiritual and physical worlds. After thinking for some time, Cha Moo-hyuk decided to make his leave with his new friend, Fluffy, which weirded out the demon due to how corny the name was. Just then, he stopped mid-course and decided to demand something more. Kero already knew what the young one was going to demand. The demon realized that the protagonist wanted to take the body of his dead partner. His sad, dead eyes were enough to answer. The enforcer explained that except for the winner and his possessions, everything in the tower after day 10 would be counted as his belongings, and that in order to get what belongs to him, the hero must trade for it, before affirming that the prices he won weren't sufficient and that he could only offer what he possessed. With that being said, the evil creature asked the young man what he was willing to trade for the body of his beloved. Shortly after, our hero descended the staircase. With a lifeless hand dangling, Cha Moo-hyuk was now carrying the body of An So-young. His eyes were filled with hatred as he thought of what just happened. Back then, the enforcer began to chuckle. Before bursting out in laughter at him, Cha Moo-hyuk affirmed that he shall eradicate the demon race, and when he does so, he shall spare Kero one time only, affirming that the second time it should be impossible for him to escape his death. This shocked the demon, who rephrased the overall idea of the hero granting him mercy once after becoming all-powerful in exchange for the body. Upon seeing the hero confirming, Kero was left shocked, and with that being said, he cracked up a smile, and reviewed his through demonic form as he pointed out how entertaining the young man was. Kero claimed that despite having met many crazy individuals, the madness of the hero was something he had never witnessed before. He was also very pleased to see that the mad young man was believing his own words. Cha Moo-hyuk asked for the body of his beloved at once. The demon affirmed that the truth wasn't enough and that he never trusted humans. Yet the gaze in the hero's eyes made him realize that he was destined for greatness. And so he demanded the protagonist to go back for him or risk being hunted down. The demon then took one final sip, before throwing his blood-filled cup away and laughing like the maniac he was. After continuing his descent, the grieving young man found himself in front of the general administrator, who praised him for beating all the talented people in the forced hunt and coming back alive. The creature was also very pleased upon hearing the hero state that it was the first time he was happy to see it, and then claimed that all the struggles he had faced inside were essential for his character development. Yet the hero didn't want to hear any of it. The demon pointed out how the protagonist hadn't lost his sharp tongue, only to look down on the little creature. and claimed that it was his first time seeing the awakened Will, who was somehow adorable. Its owner explained how he needed to go home before anything else. This confused the blonde one. So the protagonist explained how he wanted to give the lady some rest. The demon was annoyed by this humanity. It then asked him to keep a low profile, as seeing the only survivor of the hunt arrive will surely cause a fuss. Cha Moo-hyuk decided to keep that in mind, before fast dashing outside. The demon, who was surprised by this speed, assumed that the hero had acquired a skill ring that makes him emotionless, but quickly shook off the idea. Shortly after, our hero returned, leaving the demon, who asked him what he needed, surprised as it took him only 30 minutes. The young man wanted to firstly assert the value of all the items he had gathered inside the dungeon as well as the tokens. But as he claimed that it would take him some time to take everything out, the general administrator explained how he would be doing everything by himself. Upon taking a look at the demon, he was left shocked, as aside from his reward, he had earned a total of 14,700,000 points. As the hero was left baffled, the demon expressed how amazed he was, as it was the first time Iruki had acquired such wealth. The young man realized that it wasn't time to celebrate, as he asked about the 10 skill rings. The demon decided to take a look at them. Upon taking a look at the window panel, the young man was left surprised. He was now in possession of 10 different basic skills that include fire, immunity, and emotional manipulation. But the true prize was the one-time use skills such as weapon chatter and teleportation that even rookies could use. And so he decided to equip himself with these 2 skills and learn the remaining 8, as well as buying all available resistance skills. The demon was pleased to see that the young man was finally spending his points wisely. With that being said, the 10 skills became part of the young man's arsenal. The creature then decided to move on to the skills he had just bought. With that being said, our hero gained many resistances. The demon explained how many rookies foolishly buy attack skills when they should focus on the resistances, which are a little more pricey. With everything being set, the young man decided to take care of the most urgent matter, having decided to trust the words of his master, and so Cha Moo-hyuk asked for the dragon bones to be added to his body, what shocked the demon, who asked the hero if he grasped the meaning behind his own words, yet the young man confirmed his desire to replace human bones with the draconic ones. The creature explained how these bones would be hard to wield as a weapon and wasted on enhancing the Wolverine claws, affirming that it might give the protagonist the strength he wants if he manages to survive the procedure. The administrator revealed how he had never implanted such high-value bones and asked the protagonist if he was certain of his choice, seeing how high the chances of his death were. Even so, the young man affirmed that he was certain of his choice. This made the creature smile, as it immediately began the operation, claiming that he wasn't to blame if anything bad happened. Just then, our hero noticed that his mark was beginning to react. He pushed Fluffy aside for its own safety. With that being said, our hero was lifted into the air. Veins began to pop up from his hands and feet, and even his face and neck, as he suddenly began to cough blood. The protagonist found himself in great agony. The creature, amused, who noticed that the operation would be very painful, decided to use this as a chance to test the endurance of the human, and see if he would prevail in fighting the strength that he seeks. The agony had no end. Our hero could clearly sense the painful process of his entire muscle structure being destroyed and reconstructed. Blood began to come out from his eyes and mouth. Blood was also coming out when he began to cough. Yet he was possessed by a burning desire to survive the operation, determined to never taste defeat ever again. Back then, when he returned home, the young man affirmed to his master that he would try to return as fast as possible, so the old man affirmed that he should be accepting his thanks, not presenting apologies. The master pointed out how the girl who met a tragic fate must have become special to the protagonist. Our hero revealed that she was the reason behind his success, and that he wanted to bury her body after dealing with his rewards. The master explained how his student was cursed and blessed by his kindness before asking him about the results. At first, the young man had a hard time explaining, but after doing so, his master was left baffled, having not expected this level of success. Yet the modest one affirmed that he had help. The handicap then pointed out how the bones of the dragon were still too strong for the young man to maneuver and would be difficult to sell in this small village. Selling it to the administrator would give him a hard time fetching a good price. This item was so precious that even in the big city it would be difficult to find a proper buyer. Upon seeing his master suddenly pause, the young man was left intrigued. The man asked his disciple if he really wanted to become powerful quickly. Our hero affirmed, claiming that it was his weakness that resulted in the death of his partner. After seeing the gaze in his eyes, the man told him that he was now in possession of her way to do so, despite it being very risky, claiming it to be a way used by a single person that arrived even before the administrator settled in the tower, and despite having his doubts, he decided to tell his student. The man affirmed that he was free to accept or refuse this method, where he should prepare himself for death. The young man turned and looked at his late partner. Our hero smashed his fist on the table, affirming that he wanted to know about the method as he was ready for anything for the sake of power. The teacher expected such an answer from his disciple, and so he revealed it all to him. Back to the present, the administrator affirmed that the hero was an idiot for not taking his warning seriously regarding this impossible operation. And just as he claimed that a rank 6 was too weak to survive the bones of the dragon, the window panel suddenly popped up and left him utterly shocked. As all resistances and recovery skills had been upgraded to grade 6, the demon assumed that this was an effect of the transplant, as this unknown phenomenon to him could only be explained by the transplant damaging the young man in all fields. This also made him realize that the young man, who was aware of this intention, had purchased all resistance skills. Meanwhile, Fluffy looked in silence with tears in his eyes. An entire day had passed, and the results were much more than what the demon had predicted, as after 24 hours, all the resistance skills had ascended to grade 1, but it wasn't as confusing as skill synthesis being triggered. This allowed our hero to succeed in the challenging task of increasing the precision of skill combination that fuses many skills into a new one. The success state increases with the grade, and in case of failure, the involved skills would have their grades down. This was a skill that all needed to give great thought before deploying, yet this young man here was using it while unconscious, which didn't seem to be planned. All of these mysterious occurrences made the administrator believe that the one before him forgot to mention some details when giving him the tower. Just then, the demon looked at Fluffy, confused, and was left baffled, as it was using some sort of dark enchantment. The demon couldn't believe what he was seeing. What the creature was doing was undefinable, yet it was clearly related to the old events of the operation. And just as the demon was left baffled by the envied effects of the connection between evil feeling and its owner, the window panel suddenly popped up, and left him even more baffled, as the combination of skills had reached grade 3, which was something never seen before on this continent. The demon knew very well what would happen if the young man kept on growing. 2 hours had passed, and all skills created by the skill fusion would become level 2. A skill known as comprehensive resistance was created that could give our hero overall endurance. 4 hours after that, and the young man in pain slowly began to regain consciousness. The demon was left baffled, as the little creature kept on doing its things. Finally, after 2 hours, comprehensive resistance reached grade S. With that being said, a black energy surged from the protagonist, who finally landed on the ground. His landing stunned his will, scattering dust all over the room. With that being said, the bones of the dragon had been successfully implanted into our hero. This was now a new chapter in Cha Mu-yuk's life. Once alone, the administrator pulled out her pipe and lit it up, thinking about how those events were intriguing, even interesting. Back at the hut, after a long way through the high herbs, our hero finally managed to arrive home. He was pleased by the stealth-related skills that he had purchased, as they allowed him to escape attention. The master, who was sleeping while sitting, suddenly opened his eyes, as his disciple had returned. The master was happy to see that the painful operation bore its fruits and gave his student a better chance at life. The hero affirmed that it was only natural, seeing how he had him as a teacher. Just then, the man asked about Fluffy, so the hero explained how he didn't introduce him to his new friend after returning from the forced hunt, as it would take a long time. Upon hearing everything, the teacher was left baffled, unable to believe that his student was now in possession of the evil feeling. The young man was surprised to see that his teacher already knew about this item. He then explained how it was his prize as the first place of the hunt, and seeing how humans couldn't consume it, the marble was awakened and took this shape. The teacher had never expected to see an evil feeling come to life and bend to his student's will. Before explaining how him mentioning it so normally was out of the ordinary, the master, who wanted to hear everything about his student's journey, affirmed that the young one had a much more important matter to handle first, as the body of his beloved was lying on the table. The man then explained how he had taken the necessary precautions in order to prevent the body from rotting, stating that despite only having one leg left, he still had some skills he could put to good use, earning him the gratefulness of his student, who gently picked up So Young. Cha Mu-yuk apologized for delaying to hear this long. When asked where he wanted to bury her, the hero revealed to have a peaceful, isolated place in mind. With that, the master asked him then to let her farewell and return. The protagonist expressed his gratitude towards the man who looked after his partner, only for him to state that no thanks were needed, and so he picked her up and went to bury his beloved. It was now dawn. Our hero stood in front of the tree, remembering the good old days, and the first time he met the girl, this tree separated their hunting territories. Our hero apologized for having entered her domain. He then apologized for burying her in the soil, as graveyards usually attract grave robbers, promising to bury her later somewhere better. The protagonist, who claimed to be trustworthy, affirmed that with his progression, he would be back soon. He then presented his claws to the girl, claiming to have upgraded them to grade 1 and that they were very much efficient. The hero recalled how she once accused him of stealing this weapon from the movies, making tears roll down his eyes. Even so, he quickly dried them up, affirming to his partner that he would be alright, and that he still remembered her words. The protagonist was determined to fulfill their promise regarding taking down the demon god before coming back for her, and so he bid her farewell until their next reunion, asking the little marble to follow. But Fluffy turned his gaze, and found An So Young sitting nearby. The spirit then waved goodbye, and with that being said, the evil feeling began to follow his master. A gentle smile was drawn on her face, as she wanted her partner to lighten up. While walking through the forest, the young man began to think of how during the operation, he lost consciousness multiple times to the pain and could only feel darkness and great agony. But somehow, in the madness of unconsciousness, he could only see her pushing him to keep going. The young man claimed that this unfated death gave him courage, seeing how the lady overcame all obstacles and deserved to take on the demon god. Our hero couldn't accept the fact that someone like So Young was now under the soil, and so he affirmed that this particular crime of the demon race was unforgivable. Later on in the Aspel village, it was stated that the monthly rent was 200,000 points, with ejection the day of the delay, and that requests for getting servants were acceptable. This is what Lirital, the demon in charge of the tower, said to our hero before asking him to get out of the tower. But the protagonist stated that she was only repeating her words from yesterday and asked her if there was anything new, only to be met by the same coldness. Our hero began to think of all administrators' bad personalities who should show some more hospitality, seeing how their job was to provide kindness. Even so, the protagonist was glad that the papers weren't too difficult. Cha Mu-yuk was now living inside a village, thinking of how due to him being the only rookie alive, he would be hunted down by the clans that sponsored the others. Moving to another village was something forbidden to first years, which is why he had no choice but to buy an advance as a village colonist, like a second year. Despite the procedure being expensive, our hero claimed that it was worth the risk as they had the freedom to choose. The modest house that he purchased was more expensive than his old home and would serve as a base inside this village. The protagonist returned. He began to think of how he wanted to give the best care to his master. He claimed that Mr. Ku was an expensive caretaker that he hired to go on long journeys without worrying about his master. He should drop the formalities and call him by his name. The current caretaker seems to be from the orc race despite his looks and takes his job very seriously. Just then, the master called out his student for relying too much on his evil feelings, before stating that he didn't need care and that his students should just focus on becoming stronger. This made the caretaker feel as if he was not needed, so the teacher tried to clear them his understanding. As our hero explained that he didn't agree with him, Cha Mu-yuk explained that knowing that his teacher was being taken care of would give him the relief he needed in order to keep evolving with a clear mind. With that, the master had no choice but to follow the logic of his student. Cha Mu-hyuk explained how he was now strong enough to not be constantly worried about overspending his points in order to reassure his teacher. The man then pointed out how powerful his student, who asked the orc and the magical item to play in the garden, had become, revealing that he had expected him to become rank 6, and that it was a total surprise to see him surpass rank 6 by a lot. The teacher also explained that the bone transplant had many benefits as it made him greatly strong, and that it was no shock that some old phenomena would happen during the operation, like the mysterious way he created a resistance skill while being unconscious. The young man affirmed that he was confused as well and claimed to have assumed this to be some kind of survival instinct. The teacher explained that comprehensive resistance of grade 4 was very rare across the entire continent and was challenging for one to enhance alone. When asked about his last course of action, Cha Mu-yuk revealed how he had a place in mind he wanted to visit. Upon seeing this, the teacher cracked a smile, asking his student to do his best once there. It was now nighttime. Our hero was lying on his bed thinking. He hadn't slept alone in a while, as back in the hut he would share the bed with the armless man. With that being said, he raised his fist, and began to look at the butterfly pin that he once offered to his late beloved, and began to think of how well it suited her. Back then, our hero almost forgot to take the pin from her body, and so he asked So Young to not get angry at him, as he would surely give it back upon returning. The young man wanted to fulfill his promise to the girl, and was determined to see it through until the end. 2 days had passed. Our hero found himself under the sun, walking in the wide desert. He then stopped upon arriving at his destination, and lifted up his hood. The protagonist was now in front of the fortress beneath the dune. Upon feeling something jiggling, he realized that Fluffy wanted to come out despite the heat, but then realized that it shouldn't be a problem seeing how a first-class item shouldn't be too much affected by the desert. Cha Mu-yuk began to think of how this impressively immense sandcastle was reputed for its rewardless monsters. Farming points would be difficult, and there was no easy way around this map according to the master in this place that was considered as cursed ground by Aspel. Even so, the protagonist had one reason behind his presence inside it. Something began to form itself inside his hand, and after some time concentrating, the core consumer was now in possession of a sword. According to the hero who has the ability to craft small shields, this sword was pretty efficient despite not being crafted from the bones of a dragon. According to the protagonist, most monsters like the skeleton soldiers were labeled as swordsmen. Yet despite these troops being weak, they were known for their formidable sword skills, meaning that the protagonist could learn the way of the blade by fighting them. Cha Mu-yuk was determined to become more powerful. He also didn't forget the promise he made to his late partner, which is why our hero rushed inside the cursed grounds, determined to locate and kill the demon god.